Rain hammered the glass as gunfire tore through the velvet-lined chamber. Blood pooled beneath overturned champagne glasses, while politicians scrambled for the exits. At the center of the chaos stood Amara Vale, a black waitress nobody had ever bothered to remember. Her hand gripping a smoking pistol, her elegant uniform splattered with crimson. Across the room, the most feared Korean crime lord in Manhattan stared at her with something darker than shock, something closer to hunger. Because 30 seconds ago, she had just saved his life by pulling the trigger first. Now every syndicate in New York wanted her dead, and Kang Min-jae, the man who owned half the city's underworld, would burn the entire empire to the ground before he let that happen. If you want to see how an invisible woman conquered the king of criminals, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The rain started 3 hours before the shooting. Amara Vale wiped down the marble bar top for the 6th time that evening, her hands moving in practiced circles while her mind wandered somewhere far from Noir Elise. The French restaurant sat hidden on the 42nd floor of a nameless building in Manhattan's Upper East Side, accessible only by private elevator and invitation. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched endlessly, glittering towers and rivers of light bleeding through the downpour. Inside, the wealthy pretended to be comfortable. They never were. Not here. Because everyone knew what Noir Elise really was. Not just a restaurant, a meeting ground. A neutral zone where politicians shook hands with criminals, where billionaires negotiated with monsters, where blood money was laundered through wine lists that cost more than most people earned in a year. Amara had worked here for 8 months. She hated every second of it. Not the work itself. She had waitressed through college, survived far worse than demanding customers and brutal shifts. But this place felt different, wrong. The air itself seemed heavy with unspoken violence, with the weight of secrets worth killing for. She glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. 3 more hours. Amara. She turned. Michel, the head server, stood near the kitchen doors with that pinched expression he always wore when the night was about to get complicated. "Private room," he said flatly. "You're covering it." Her stomach dropped. "I thought Claudette called in sick." Michel's tone made it clear he didn't believe that any more than she did. "You're up, and don't mess this up. The guest is particular." "Who is it?" Michel's face went carefully blank. That told her everything. Someone dangerous, someone the other servers had suddenly developed convenient excuses to avoid. "Just keep your head down and your mouth shut," he said quietly. "Smile. Be professional. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, don't ask questions." He disappeared into the kitchen before she could respond. Amara exhaled slowly, straightening her uniform, black silk with subtle gold embroidery, elegant and deliberately anonymous. She had tied her natural hair back into a tight bun that morning, applied minimal makeup, learned years ago how to make herself invisible in rooms full of people who believed the help didn't deserve to be seen. She grabbed the leather-bound menu and headed toward the private chamber at the far end of the restaurant. The velvet curtain hung closed. 2 men in dark suits flanked the entrance, their jackets tailored to hide the weapons everyone knew they carried. Neither acknowledged her existence as she approached. "I'm here to serve the private room," Amara said quietly. The taller guard studied her for a long moment, his gaze cold and assessing. Then he stepped aside and pulled the curtain open. Amara walked through. The chamber was smaller than she expected, intimate, almost claustrophobic. Candlelight flickered across dark wood paneling and deep burgundy upholstery. Rain hammered against the massive windows that dominated the far wall, turning the city beyond into a watercolor blur. At the center table sat 3 people. Amara recognized 2 of them immediately. Victoria Chen, a socialite whose face appeared regularly in tabloids, always draped in designer gowns and controversy. And Marcus Laurent, a French businessman whose name carried whispers of offshore accounts and political bribes. But it was the third person who made the air leave her lungs. Kang Min-jae. Even seated, his presence dominated the space. 32 years old, according to the rumors, though his face carried the kind of hardness that made age irrelevant. Korean features, sharp and aristocratic. Dark hair swept back from his forehead, expensive suit cut perfectly to his frame. His hands rested on the table. No rings, no watch, nothing to draw attention, But there was something about the way he held himself that suggested violence beneath the polish, like a blade hidden in silk. Amara had heard the stories. Everyone had. Kang Min-jae owned one of the largest private shipping companies in the world, legitimate on paper, whispered to move everything from weapons to human cargo beneath its corporate veneer. The Korean Mafia in New York answered to him. So did half the city's underground economy. People who crossed him disappeared. Entire organizations crumbled at his word. And now she was supposed to serve him wine. Finally, Victoria drawled without looking up, "I'm starving." Amara approached the table, keeping her posture perfect, her expression neutral. "Good evening. My name is Amara. I'll be serving you tonight. May I start with, can you even read?" Victoria interrupted, her tone dripping with amusement. Amara stopped mid-sentence. Victoria leaned back in her chair, twirling her champagne glass. "The menu, darling, it's in French. I'm just wondering if you need help with the big words." The insult hung in the air. Marcus laughed, sharp and performative. But Min-jae didn't react at all. He simply watched, his expression unreadable, his dark eyes fixed on some point beyond the table. Amara felt heat crawl up her neck. Not embarrassment, rage. The kind that had simmered beneath her skin for years, fed by 1,000 casual cruelties from people who believed money made them untouchable. She could walk away. Keep her head down like Michelle said. Smile and be invisible. Instead, she opened the menu and began to speak. "Ce soir, nous proposons une entrée de foie gras poêlé, accompagnée d'une compote de figues et pain brioché légèrement toasté," Amara said smoothly, her Parisian French flawless and aristocratic. "Pour le plat principal, vous avez le choix entre un carré d'agneau rôti aux herbes de Provence avec une réduction de vin rouge ou bien un homard breton grillé servi avec un beurre d'estragon et légumes de saison." She paused, letting the silence stretch. Victoria's smile had frozen. Marcus stopped laughing, and for the first time, Kang Min-jae looked directly at her. Amara continued in perfect English, her voice calm and sharp. "The appetizer is seared foie gras with fig compote and toasted brioche. For the main course, you can choose herb-crusted lamb with red wine reduction or Breton lobster with tarragon butter and seasonal vegetables. The dessert menu includes a dark chocolate soufflé or a vanilla bean panna cotta with berry coulis. Shall I give you a moment to decide, or would you like recommendations based on the wine pairings?" The room had gone completely still. Victoria's face flushed red. "Where did you—" "Thank you," Min-jae said quietly. His voice cut through the tension like a knife. Not loud, not aggressive, but absolute. Victoria shut her mouth instantly. Min-jae's gaze hadn't left Amara's face. "What's your name?" "Amara Vale, sir." "Where did you learn French, Amara Vale?" She could feel Victoria seething beside him, feel Marcus staring with newfound interest. Every instinct screamed at her to deflect, to minimize herself, to disappear back into invisibility. But something about the way Min-jae asked, without condescension, without mockery, made her answer honestly. "Paris," she said. "I studied linguistics at the Sorbonne for 2 years. And now you're here." It wasn't a question. It was an observation that somehow felt more intimate than it should have. "Yes," Amara said simply. "Now I'm here." Min-jae leaned back in his chair, and for the first time that night, the corner of his mouth lifted into something that might have been a smile. Not polite. Predatory. "Bring me the lamb," he said, "and a bottle of the 2015 Chateauneuf du Pape. Victoria will have the lobster. Marcus will have whatever he thinks impresses people." Marcus laughed awkwardly. Victoria looked like she wanted to throw her glass, but neither said a word. Because when Kang Min-jae spoke, people listened. Amara nodded and turned toward the exit, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Behind her, she heard Min-jae's voice, low and amused. "I like her." Victoria's response was venomous. "Don't!" Amara pushed through the velvet curtain and walked straight to the back hallway, her hands shaking as adrenaline crashed through her system. She pressed her palms against the cool wall and exhaled slowly. What the hell had she just done? She had worked so hard to be invisible here, to avoid drawing attention, to collect her paycheck and disappear. Now she had just embarrassed a billionaire socialite in front of a crime lord who could destroy her life with a phone call. Stupid, reckless, dangerous. But God, it had felt good. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Amara served the private room with mechanical precision, delivering courses, refilling wine, clearing plates. Minjae barely spoke after that initial exchange, conducting quiet business with Marcus while Victoria drank too much and glared daggers at everyone. But Amara could feel his attention. Every time she entered the room, his gaze tracked her. Not obviously. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But she noticed. The way his eyes followed her movements. The way conversations paused half a second when she approached. The way the air itself seemed to shift when she was close. It made her skin prickle with something between fear and something else she refused to name. By the time the dinner ended, rain still hammered the windows, and the restaurant had mostly emptied. Amara cleared the final plates while Victoria stumbled toward the exit, barely held upright by Marcus. Minjae remained seated, finishing the last of his wine. Amara hesitated near the doorway. Protocol said she should leave him alone, but protocol also said she should have kept her mouth shut earlier. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Kang?" she asked quietly. He set down his glass. "You studied linguistics." "Yes." "Why did you stop?" The question caught her off guard, not because it was intrusive, though it was, but because he asked it like he actually wanted to know. Amara's throat tightened. "Family emergency. I had to come home. To work here. To pay bills." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Not all of us have the luxury of choice, Mr. Kang." She regretted it immediately. You didn't snap at men like him. You smiled and apologized and disappeared, but Minjae just studied her with that same unreadable expression. "No," he said finally. "I suppose we don't." Something in his tone made her look up. For just a moment, beneath the expensive suit and the reputation and the violence everyone knew he commanded, she saw something else. Something tired, something almost human. Then it was gone. Minjae stood adjusting his cufflinks. "You speak Korean?" "No." "Japanese?" "A little." "Mandarin?" "Conversational." He nodded slowly, like she had confirmed something. "Good night, Amara Vale." He walked past her, his bodyguards materializing from the shadows to flank him as he headed toward the elevator. Amara watched him go, her pulse still racing. She didn't understand what had just happened, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. 3 days later, Minjae came back. Same private room, same time. Different guests? Chinese businessmen this time. Their conversation a rapid mix of Mandarin and English that Amara couldn't fully follow. But when she approached the table, Minjae looked up and said, "You'll serve us tonight." Not a question. An order. It happened again 2 days after that, then again the following week. Always the same room. Always Minjae. Always a rotating cast of dangerous men conducting business that made the air feel electric with unspoken threats. And always, he requested Amara specifically. Michelle pulled her aside after the 4th visit. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Amara said honestly. "Kang doesn't make special requests. He doesn't notice the staff. He doesn't—" Michelle stopped, searching for words. "Whatever you did, don't do it again." But Amara hadn't done anything. That was the problem. She just served him, professionally, quietly, exactly like she served everyone else. Except Minjae kept coming back. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice at first, their interactions began to change. It started with small things, questions about the wine list, comments about the menu, brief exchanges in French that felt less like customer service and more like actual conversation. Then one night, during a particularly tense meeting with Russian associates, Minjae abruptly switched to French mid-sentence and addressed her directly. "Qu'est-ce que tu penses de ces hommes?" he asked casually. "What do you think of these men?" The Russian stared at her, uncomprehending. Amara's pulse jumped. This was a test, or a trap, or both. She kept her expression neutral and responded in equally fluent French. "Je pense qu'ils vous sous-estiment." "I think they underestimate you." Minjae's smile was sharp, intelligent, smart. He turned back to the Russians and destroyed them in negotiations over the next hour. Afterward, as Amara cleared the table, Min Jae spoke without looking up from his phone. "You're observant. Part of the job." "No," he said. "It's not." He left a tip that night that was more than she made in a month. Amara stared at the cash for a long time before pocketing it. Sats. The weeks bled together. Amara's life became a strange split existence. Days spent visiting her father in the hospital, watching him deteriorate under the weight of medical debt that grew faster than she could pay it. Nights spent serving criminals and billionaires at Noir Elise, navigating a world that felt increasingly surreal. And through it all, Min Jae kept coming back. Their conversations deepened, started spanning topics that had nothing to do with food or service, philosophy, literature, politics. Always in French, creating a private language that separated them from everyone else in the room. Amara knew it was dangerous. She knew she should stop engaging, should keep things professional, should remember exactly who he was and what he did. But there was something addictive about being seen. For so long she had been invisible, the help, background noise in other people's lives. But when Min Jae looked at her, she existed. Not as a waitress, not as a commodity, as a person. It terrified her how much she had started craving that feeling. One Friday night in early December, she was clearing tables in the main dining room when Michel appeared beside her, his face ashen. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "Right now." Amara frowned. "My shift isn't—" "Two men have been asking about you. They're not customers." Ice shot through her veins. "What?" "They wanted to know your full name, where you live, what time you get off work." Michel grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "Amara, these aren't regular people. I've seen men like this before. You need to go. Out the back. Don't go home tonight. Find somewhere safe." "Why would anyone—" But she already knew. Min Jae. Being near him had painted a target on her back. Amara's hand shook as she untied her apron. "My father is in a hospital surrounded by security and staff. You're not. Go. Now." She went. Out through the kitchen, past the confused line cooks, through the service exit that dumped into a narrow alley behind the building. Rain had started again, turning the December night brutal and freezing. Amara pulled her coat tighter and started walking fast toward the subway entrance 3 blocks away. She made it 1 block before she heard footsteps behind her. Her pulse spiked. Don't run. Running means you know they're following you. She turned the corner, walking faster. The footsteps matched her pace. Amara's breath came quicker. She could see the subway entrance ahead, see the light spilling up from underground, see people. A hand grabbed her arm and yanked her backward into the shadows. Amara screamed. A second hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off the sound. She was slammed against the wet brick wall, her vision blurring from the impact. 2 men, both large, both unfamiliar. "You're coming with us," the first one said, Eastern European accent, thick and cold. "Someone wants to talk to you about your boyfriend." "I don't have—" Amara tried to twist free. The man's grip tightened, fingers digging into her jaw. "The Korean. You think we're stupid? You think we don't notice? I'm just a waitress." "Bullshit." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her face. "You're leverage, and you're going to help us send Mr. Kang a message about respecting territory." The second man pulled out a knife. Amara's mind went blank with terror. This was it. This was how she died. In a freezing alley behind a restaurant where nobody would find her until morning. Then headlights exploded into the alley, blinding, searing. A black sedan slammed to a stop 10 feet away, doors flying open before it had fully stopped moving. Men poured out. 5 of them, armed, moving with military precision. The man holding Amara released her instantly and reached for his weapon. He never made it. The first gunshot was deafeningly loud in the confined space, then the second, then chaos. Amara dropped to the ground, covering her head, her ears ringing, her heart trying to explode out of her chest. It was over in seconds. When the gunfire stopped, the 2 men who had grabbed her were on the ground, bleeding, screaming, very much alive, but very much defeated. Amara looked up. Kang Min Jae stood in the center of the alley, perfectly dry despite the rain, his dark coat immaculate, his expression absolutely murderous. He walked past the crying men on the ground like they were trash on the sidewalk, moving directly toward Amara. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Min-jae knelt in front of her, his eyes scanning her face, her arms, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Amara shook her head mutely. Did they touch you? My arm! Min-jae's gaze dropped to where her sleeve had torn, where bruises were already forming. Something dark and terrible moved behind his eyes. He stood, turning to his men. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, infinitely more terrifying than shouting. Take them to the warehouse. I want names. I want who sent them. I want every detail. His tone dropped another octave. And make sure they understand what happens when someone touches what's mine. Amara's breath caught. What's mine? Min-jae turned back to her and extended his hand. Come with me. I can't. You will. Not a request. They found you once. They'll find you again. You're not safe. My father is being moved to a private facility under guard as we speak. Min-jae's expression softened slightly. You're both protected now, but you need to trust me. Amara stared at his outstretched hand. Everything she had built, the careful invisibility, the boundaries, the safety of being nobody, had just shattered. She could refuse, walk away, try to go back to her life. But they had found her once, and Kang Min-jae was offering something she hadn't had in years. Protection. Amara took his hand. Min-jae pulled her to her feet gently and led her toward the sedan. One of his men draped a dry coat over her shoulders, expensive, warm, smelling faintly of cologne. As they drove away from the alley, Amara watched through the window as the two men were dragged into a black van. She should have felt horrified. Instead, she just felt numb. Why? She whispered. Min-jae sat beside her in the back seat, his attention fixed on his phone as he issued rapid orders in Korean. Why what? Why do you care? I'm nobody. He looked up then, his expression unreadable. No, he said quietly. You're not. The car slid through Manhattan's rain-soaked streets, carrying Amara Vale away from her old life and towards something she didn't yet understand. Behind them, in that dark alley, her invisibility had died, and something far more dangerous had begun. The penthouse occupied the entire 58th floor of a building Amara didn't recognize. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan sprawling below, like a circuit board, rain streaking the glass in endless rivulets. Inside, everything was dark wood and leather, minimalist and expensive, the kind of space that made you aware of how much you didn't belong. Amara stood dripping in the entrance while Min-jae's men swept through the apartment with practiced efficiency, checking rooms, securing exits, establishing a perimeter she couldn't see but could feel tightening around her. Min-jae removed his coat and draped it over a chair. You'll stay here tonight. I need to see my father. He's safe, I told you that. I need to see him. Amara's voice cracked. I need to know he's actually okay. Min-jae studied her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. He made a call, spoke briefly in Korean, then handed her the device. Talk. Amara pressed it to her ear. Hello? Amara? Her father's voice, weak but alive. Baby, where are you? The hospital said there was a security concern. They moved me to some private facility. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Hurt me? No, sweetheart, I'm fine. Confused as hell, but fine. There are men outside my door. Nobody will tell me what's happening. Relief flooded through her so intensely her knees nearly buckled. I'll explain later. Just stay there. Don't leave. Don't talk to anyone you don't recognize. Amara, what's going on? I love you, Dad. I'll see you soon. She ended the call before he could ask more questions she couldn't answer and handed the phone back to Min-jae. Thank you. He pocketed it without responding, his attention already shifting to one of his men who had appeared in the doorway. They spoke in rapid Korean, Min-jae's expression darkening with each sentence. Finally, he dismissed the man with a curt nod and turned back to Amara. You should clean up. There are clothes in the bedroom, second door on the left. We'll talk after. Talk about what? About why the Volkov family tried to kidnap you tonight. The name meant nothing to her. I don't know who that is. Russian syndicate. They've been pushing into territory they don't own, testing boundaries. Min-jae's jaw tightened. Apparently they decided you were an acceptable target. Because they think I'm... Amara couldn't finish the sentence. Because they're not entirely wrong. The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold she was, how her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'm just a waitress who speaks French, that's all. I'm not part of your world. You became part of it the moment I noticed you. Min-jae's voice was flat, factual. I'm sorry, but that's the reality now. So what am I supposed to do? Just stay here forever? Become your prisoner because you decided to have conversations with me? Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or guilt. You're not a prisoner. You're under my protection. There's a difference. Is there? Min-jae stepped closer, and Amara fought the instinct to back away. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I can send you away. Different city, different identity. Enough money to start over. Your father, too. You'd be safe. But they'd keep looking. Maybe not the Volkovs specifically, but someone. Because now you're known. Now you're a weakness they think they can exploit. He paused. Or you can stay. Learn how this works. Become strong enough that no one dares touch you. You mean become like you? I mean survive. Amara's laugh came out sharp and bitter. You're offering me two types of cage? I'm offering you choices most people in your position don't get. Min-jae's eyes were dark, unreadable. Think about it. Clean up. Rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk details. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into what looked like a home office and closing the door behind him. Amara stood alone in the massive living room, surrounded by wealth and violence and protection she had never asked for, and tried not to fall apart. She found the bedroom exactly where he said it would be. The space was immaculate and impersonal. Expensive furniture, neutral colors, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. The attached bathroom had heated floors and a shower large enough for 3 people. Amara stripped off her wet, ruined uniform and stood under water hot enough to hurt. She scrubbed her skin until it turned red, trying to erase the feeling of those men's hands on her, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 3 hours. Her life had imploded, just completely shattered. This morning she had been invisible, struggling but safe. Tonight she was hiding in a crime lord's penthouse while Russian gangsters bled in some warehouse because they had made the mistake of touching her. The water ran cold before she finally stepped out. In the closet she found clothes that definitely didn't belong to Min-jae. Women's clothes, expensive and tasteful, still tagged and unworn. Amara tried not to think too hard about why he had them. She pulled on soft black pants and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her rent, then sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her reflection in the darkened window. Who the hell was she now? Not the waitress, not the linguistics student, not the daughter trying desperately to save her father. Something else. Something she didn't have a name for yet. A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she called. One of Min-jae's men entered, younger than the others, maybe 30, with sharp features and careful eyes. "Mr. Kang asked me to check if you need anything. Food, medication, anything." "I'm fine." He nodded, but didn't leave. "My name is Jin. I'll be stationed outside your door tonight. If you need anything, just call." "Am I really not a prisoner?" Jin's expression didn't change. "Mr. Kang doesn't keep prisoners. He keeps people safe. Sometimes those things look the same from the inside." "That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be, it's just true." He started to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, the Volkovs were sloppy, desperate. They're losing ground and needed a win. You were convenient. Lucky me. Could be. Mr. Kang doesn't protect people he doesn't value. That's worth something in our world. Jin left before she could ask what exactly Min-jae valued about a waitress he barely knew. Amara lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer against windows 500 feet above the ground. Sleep didn't come for a long time. Morning arrived cold and gray. Amara woke to the smell of coffee and found fresh clothes laid out on a chair, her jeans, a cream-colored blouse, soft leather boots that fit perfectly. She dressed and ventured out of the bedroom. Min-jae sat at the dining table with his laptop open and 3 phones arranged beside him. He wore different clothes, dark slacks, white shirt, no tie. His hair was damp like he'd recently showered. He looked up as she approached. Coffee's in the kitchen. There's food if you're hungry. Amara poured herself a cup from the expensive machine she didn't know how to operate properly and returned to hover near the table. What happens now? Now we figure out how to keep you alive. Min-jae closed his laptop. The Volkovs were paid to grab you, not by their leadership. This was a rogue operation by one of their lieutenants trying to prove himself. He's dead now. You killed him. No, his own boss did, once he realized how badly the situation had been mishandled. Min-jae's tone was matter of fact. Attacking you meant attacking me. That's not something anyone does accidentally. So it's over? No, because now everyone knows you exist, and they'll be wondering why I reacted the way I did. He stood, moving to the windows. Perception is everything in my world. Right now you're perceived as either my lover or my weakness. Both make you a target. I'm neither of those things. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality. Amara set down her coffee cup harder than necessary. So fix the perception. Tell people I'm nobody. Too late. I already showed my hand. Min-jae turned to face her. The way I responded last night. The speed, the violence, the resources I mobilized. Everyone saw it. They know you matter to me. Why do I? The question came out before she could stop it. Min-jae was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer. Because for 3 months, you were the only person who talked to me like I was human. Not a king, not a monster, just a man having a conversation. He paused. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my life? Amara's chest tightened. That's not a reason to upend someone's entire existence. No, it's not. He met her eyes. But I did it anyway, so now we deal with the consequences. We. Yes, I didn't ask for this. I know. Something that might have been regret crossed his face. If I could undo it, I would. But I can't. So instead, I'm going to make sure you survive it. Before Amara could respond, one of Min-jae's phones buzzed. He answered it, listened, then switched to Korean. The conversation was brief and tense. When he hung up, his expression had changed. Get dressed for going out, something professional. Why? Because you're about to get what you wanted. You're going to see your father. The private medical facility occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Midtown. Armed security stood at every entrance, and the elevator required biometric clearance to operate. Amara's father was in a corner suite that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital room. He sat propped up in bed, looking significantly better than the last time she'd seen him. His color improved and his breathing easier. He stared when she walked in. Amara, what the hell is going on? She crossed the room and hugged him carefully, mindful of his IV lines. It's complicated. Complicated? Baby, I got moved to a facility that costs more per day than I made in a year. There are men with guns outside my door, and you show up looking like you stepped out of a fashion magazine. He pulled back to study her face. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Amara glanced back at the door where Min-jae stood speaking with doctors in the hallway. I just served the wrong person at the restaurant. Her father followed her gaze. That man? Yes. Who is he? Amara hesitated. His name is Kang Min-jae. He's powerful, dangerous. And someone tried to kidnap me last night to get to him. The color drained from her father's face. What? I'm safe now. You're safe. But things are different now. Complicated. Complicated? Her father's voice rose. Amara, are you involved with criminals? No, I'm not. She stopped. Was she? What else would you call her current situation? I don't know what I am right now, Dad, but I need you to trust me. I need you to stay here, let these people protect you, and not ask too many questions. That's not how this works. You're my daughter, and I'm trying to keep us both alive. The words came out sharper than she intended. Please, just trust me. Her father stared at her for a long moment, then sank back against the pillows. How did we get here? I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just tell me you know what you're doing. Amara thought about lying, but her father had always been able to read her. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. He reached for her hand. Just be careful. Please. She promised she would, even though they both knew that promise might not mean anything anymore. They left an hour later after Amara had verified her father was receiving excellent care and was genuinely safe. In the car, Min Jae made more calls while Amara stared out the window at a city that suddenly felt foreign. "Where are we going now?" she asked when he finally hung up. "Shopping." "What?" "You need clothes, documents, a phone that's secure, credit cards that can't be traced." Min Jae didn't look up from his laptop. "If you're going to exist in my world, you need the tools to do it properly." "I didn't agree to exist in your world." "Then what are you doing in my car?" The question was fair. Amara didn't have an answer. They stopped at a boutique in Soho that wasn't open to the public. The owner, a severe French woman named Margot, took one look at Min Jae and ushered them into a private showroom. "She needs everything," Min Jae said in perfect French. "Casual, professional, formal, nothing flashy, nothing that draws attention." Margot's eyes swept over Amara with professional assessment. "Of course. Give me 2 hours." What followed was the most surreal shopping experience of Amara's life. Margot brought out outfit after outfit while Minji sat in a leather chair, occasionally offering opinions, mostly working on his phone. Amara tried on clothes that cost more than she made in months, feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. "You're uncomfortable," Min Jae observed when Margot left to find different shoes. "I don't need any of this." "Yes, you do. Looking the part keeps you safe. People don't question someone who appears to belong." "I don't belong." "Not yet." He set down his phone. "But you will." "You're very certain of that." "I'm certain you're smart enough to adapt. You wouldn't have survived Paris alone at 22 if you weren't." The fact that he remembered that detail from a throwaway comment weeks ago shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. Margot returned with shoes and a knowing smile. "These will work perfectly with the evening pieces." By the time they left, Amara had an entire new wardrobe being sent to the penthouse. Min Jae had also acquired her a phone, wallet, and identification documents she definitely didn't want to know the source of. "How did you get a driver's license made in 3 hours?" she asked in the car. "I didn't. I had it made last week." Amara stared at him. "You planned this?" "I planned for contingencies. I always do." Min Jae's expression was unreadable. "After the 3rd time I requested you specifically at the restaurant, I knew there was a possibility you'd become vulnerable. I wanted to be ready to protect you if necessary." "That's terrifying." "That's thorough." "You're splitting hairs." "Perhaps." He almost smiled. "But you're still alive, so my methods have some merit." Amara wanted to argue, but couldn't find solid ground. Everything he said was technically true, even if it made her feel like a chess piece being moved around a board she couldn't see. The car stopped at a nondescript building in the financial district. Min Jae led her inside and up to the 15th floor, where a frosted glass door read Chen and Associates in discreet letters. Inside, a young Korean woman stood from behind a sleek desk. "Mr. Kang, she's in the conference room." Min Jae nodded and gestured for Amara to follow. The conference room held a single woman, mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that assessed Amara in seconds. "This is Diane Chen," Min Jae said, "best lawyer in New York. Diane, this is Amara Vale." "A pleasure." Diane gestured to the chairs. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." Amara sat, her confusion growing. "I don't understand. Why do I need a lawyer?" "Because your father's medical debt was recently purchased by a collection agency with ties to organized crime," Diane said bluntly. "The agency is called Harbor Financial Services. They specialize in acquiring desperate debt and using it as leverage against vulnerable people." The floor dropped out from under Amara. "What?" "The original hospital sold the debt 2 weeks ago. Harbor paid 60 cents on the dollar, which means they now legally own over $300,000 in debt with your father's name on it." Diane pulled out a folder. "They've been waiting for the right time to approach you with an offer." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that destroys lives." Min Jae's voice was cold. "They would have given you a choice. Work for them or watch your father lose everything and end up in prison for fraud they'd manufacture." Amara's hands started shaking. "How do you know this?" Because I bought Harbor Financial Services this morning. Min-jae said it like he was discussing the weather. Along with every other debt collection agency operating in their network. Your father's debt no longer exists. Legally, it's been settled. The room spun. You... what? I eliminated the threat. Min-jae leaned back in his chair. Harbor was owned by the Calabrese family. They thought your vulnerability made you useful. They were wrong. Diane pushed the folder across the table. This is documentation showing the debt was purchased and immediately forgiven as part of a corporate restructuring. Your father is clear. You're clear. And the Calabrese family is no longer in the debt collection business. Amara couldn't process it. Couldn't understand how her entire life had just been reorganized in a few hours by a man who shouldn't have cared. Why? She whispered. Min-jae's expression softened slightly. Because they were going to use you, and I don't allow that. You barely know me. I know enough. Amara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need air. She walked out of the conference room, through the office, into the hallway. Her chest felt tight, her breathing shallow. This was too much. All of it. The violence, the money, the casual way Min-jae had just erased $300,000 of debt like it was nothing. She heard footsteps behind her. You're panicking, Min-jae said quietly. I'm processing. Same thing. Amara turned on him, anger finally breaking through the shock. You can't just fix my life without asking me first. You can't make decisions about my father, my safety, my entire existence without... Without what? Without your permission? Min-jae stepped closer, his voice dropping. Amara, they were going to destroy you, slowly, methodically, until you had no choice but to become their tool. I stopped that. I'm not going to apologize for it. You're taking away my agency. I'm keeping you alive. Those aren't always compatible. Then maybe I don't want to be kept alive like this. The words exploded out of her. Maybe I'd rather struggle and fail on my own terms than become some trophy you decided to protect because you're bored. Min-jae's jaw tightened. For a moment, real anger flashed in his eyes. You think that's what this is? I don't know what this is. You won't tell me. It's guilt. He said it loud enough that his voice echoed in the empty hallway. It's guilt because I made you visible, and visibility in my world gets people killed. It's guilt because you did nothing wrong except be intelligent and interesting, and now you're paying the price for my attention. He stopped, breathing hard. So yes, I'm fixing it. However I can. Because I don't get to walk away from the consequences of my actions, and neither do you. Amara stared at him, her anger deflating into something more complicated. I didn't ask for your guilt, she said quietly. No, but you have it anyway. They stood in the hallway, the city humming 50 floors below, the space between them charged with everything neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Amara exhaled. What now? Now you decide. Min-jae's expression shifted back to neutral. Accept my protection, let me teach you how to survive this world, and become someone no one dares touch. Or I set you up somewhere far from here with a new identity and enough money to start over. Your choice. Those are still both cages. Yes, but one of them comes with power. Amara thought about her father in that expensive facility. Thought about the men who had grabbed her in the alley. Thought about 3 years of being invisible, of struggling, of watching her dreams die slowly under the weight of circumstances she couldn't control. Maybe she was tired of being powerless. Maybe that was dangerous. But maybe dangerous was exactly what she needed to become. Teach me, she said. Min-jae's eyes darkened with something that looked like satisfaction. Okay, Bolmai. The lessons started immediately. Not lessons in the traditional sense, no classroom, no curriculum, just immersion. Min-jae took her to meetings, negotiations, dinners with dangerous men who smiled with empty eyes. He taught her how to read a room, how to spot threats, how to understand the unspoken language of power. Watch their hands, he said one night at a restaurant where Japanese yakuza discussed shipping routes. When people lie, their hands either go completely still or move too much. Middle ground is usually honest. Amara watched, learned. He taught her about territory and respect, about the invisible borders that carved up Manhattan's underworld, about which families could be negotiated with and which only understood violence. The Irish control the docks south of Chelsea, he explained over maps in his penthouse. The Italians own most of the waste management. Russians are pushing into construction. Chinese triads run Chinatown and most of the gambling. Everyone else fights over scraps. And you? I move things they can't. Information, cargo, people. I'm useful to everyone, which means I'm protected by the balance itself. What happens if the balance shifts? War, he said it simply. Which is why it's in everyone's interest to keep me neutral. Amara absorbed it all, her brain cataloging patterns and hierarchies the way she had once cataloged linguistic structures. But the real education came in moments she didn't expect, like the night Min-jae took her to a Korean bathhouse in Flushing, the kind where no weapons were allowed and business could be conducted in nakedness that forced honesty. She waited outside while he negotiated with an older man whose scarred body told stories Min-jae wouldn't share. Afterward, in the car, she asked, what did he want? Permission to retire. His son is taking over the organization, and he wanted my guarantee that the transition wouldn't trigger a territory dispute. Did you give it? Yes, because he earned it. 30 years, never broke his word, never pushed boundaries. Minji stared out the window. Honor still means something in my world. It's one of the few things that does. Amara heard the weight in his voice. But not to everyone. No, not to everyone. She learned about the violence too. Not by witnessing it directly, Min-jae kept her away from the worst of it, but by seeing its aftermath. The empty chairs at meetings, the way people flinched when certain names were mentioned, the careful way Min-jae's men moved through the world, always ready for betrayal. 3 weeks into her new existence, Amara sat at Min-jae's dining table at 2 a.m, unable to sleep, when Jin appeared from his post. Can't sleep? He asked. Just thinking. About? How easily you all switch between normal conversation and discussing murder. Jin smiled slightly. It's not murder, it's resource management. Sometimes the resource is a problem that needs eliminating. That's a horrifying way to think about human life. Maybe, but it keeps me alive. He poured himself water from the kitchen. You're doing better than most civilians would. Adjusting, I mean. I don't feel like I'm adjusting. I feel like I'm drowning slowly. Same thing in our world. Jin sat across from her. Can I give you advice? Sure. Don't fall in love with him. The words hit like cold water. I'm not yet. But I've seen how he looks at you, and how you look at him when you think no one's watching. Jin's expression was serious. Mr. Kang is a good man by the standards of our world, but he's still dangerous. And loving someone dangerous always ends badly. You're assuming I have a choice in the matter. You always have a choice. Sometimes we just don't like the options. Jin left her alone with that thought and the sound of rain starting again against the windows. The turning point came exactly 4 weeks after the alley. Min-jae received a request for a meeting from the Corsican Syndicate, a French criminal organization that controlled most of the international art smuggling through New York. They wanted to expand into Min-jae's shipping routes and were willing to pay substantial fees. It's a trap, Jin said immediately when Min-jae told his inner circle about the invitation. Obviously, Min-jae replied, but a profitable one if we're careful. They gathered in the penthouse that night. Min-jae, Jin, 3 other lieutenants whose names Amar had learned, and now her. She had become part of these meetings by default, her presence accepted without question. The Corsicans are old school, one of the lieutenants said. They'll conduct the entire negotiation in Corsican-accented French mixed with local slang. They're counting on you using a professional interpreter who won't catch the nuances. Min-jae glanced at Amara. Thoughts? She had been listening quietly, turning the situation over in her mind. They'll use the language barrier to hide the real terms. Agree to something in French that sounds reasonable but has different implications in English. By the time you realize what you actually agreed to, it'll be too late. Can you interpret accurately? Corsican dialect is different from Parisian French, but I studied it. I can follow it. Min-jae nodded slowly. Then you're coming with me. The room went quiet. Mr. Kang, Jin said carefully, that's a significant risk. If they realize she understands everything, they'll be more careful with their words, which works in our favor. Min-jae's tone left no room for argument. Amara comes. We prepare for every contingency. Over the next week, Min-jae drilled her on every possible scenario. What to listen for. How to signal danger without being obvious. Where to position herself in the room. How to stay calm when violence erupted. Because it might. If shooting starts, you drop and don't move, he told her the night before the meeting. Don't try to help. Don't try to run. Just drop. Comforting. It's realistic. His expression was serious. This is dangerous, Amara. More dangerous than anything I've asked you to do. If you want to back out, I don't. Why not? She thought about her father, safe and healing. Thought about the debt that no longer existed. Thought about the power of being useful instead of invisible. Because I'm tired of being protected, she said. I want to be essential. Min-jae studied her face for a long moment. You already are. The way he said it made something shift in her chest. Something she knew she shouldn't feel but couldn't stop. Jin had been right. She was already falling. The meeting was set for a neutral location, an underground casino beneath a restaurant in Little Italy. The space was baroque and excessive, all red velvet and gold fixtures, smoke and dim lighting that made everything feel dreamlike and dangerous. Amara wore the black dress Min-jae had selected. Elegant, unremarkable, expensive enough to belong but not so flashy it drew attention. Her hair was pulled back, no jewelry, nothing that could be used against her. She felt like she was preparing for war. Maybe she was. Min-jae's men secured the perimeter while he led her inside. The Corsican delegation was already seated, 5 men, all older, all carrying themselves with the confidence of people used to winning. The leader was called Dominique. Silver hair, expensive suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Kang, he said in French. A pleasure. And who is this? My interpreter, Min-jae replied smoothly in French. I prefer to ensure nothing is lost in translation. Dominique's smile sharpened. Of course. Please, sit. They arranged themselves around the table. Amara positioned herself slightly behind Min-jae's right shoulder, close enough to hear everything, far enough to seem deferential. The negotiation started normally, discussing routes, fees, schedules. Amara translated faithfully, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. But 15 minutes in, Dominique's tone shifted. He began mixing Corsican slang into his French, testing whether Amara could follow. She could. The merchandise moves through Montreal first, Dominique said, using a phrase that technically meant merchandise, but in Corsican context referred to people. Your ships provide the final passage. We take 70%, you take 30%. Amara translated exactly what he meant. They want to use your shipping routes for human trafficking. They're offering you 30% of profits. Min-jae's expression didn't change. I don't move people. We're not talking about people, Dominique said smoothly, still in French. Just cargo that requires discretion. He's still talking about trafficking, Amara said quietly. He's trying to make it sound like something else. Min-jae leaned back. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My ships don't carry that type of cargo. Dominique's smile faded slightly. Mr. Kang, we're offering you a very lucrative arrangement. And I'm declining it. The temperature in the room dropped. One of Dominique's men leaned over and whispered something. Dominique nodded, then switched to even heavier Corsican dialect. After we sign the contract, he said, the words deliberately unclear, we'll arrange for Mr. Kang to have an accident, make it look like natural causes. Then we take his routes entirely. Amara's blood went cold. She didn't hesitate. They're planning to kill you, she said clearly. After you sign, they think I don't understand the dialect. Everything happened at once. Dominique's face went white with rage. Min-jae moved. His hand slammed down on the table, and suddenly a gun appeared from somewhere under his jacket. At the same moment, Jin and the other men positioned around the room drew weapons. I think we're done here, Min-jae said in perfect French, his voice deadly calm. Dominique stood slowly, his hands visible. You brought a spy. I brought someone competent. Not my fault you underestimated her. This is a declaration. The first shot came from one of Dominique's men. Amara dropped instantly, her body hitting the floor before her brain fully processed the sound. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. More gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. She couldn't see anything from the floor, just shadows moving above her, flashes of muzzle fire, the sick sound of bullets hitting flesh. It lasted maybe 20 seconds. When the shooting stopped, someone grabbed her arm. Amara flinched, but it was Jin. "You're okay," he said quickly. "Can you walk?" She nodded mutely. Jin pulled her up. The room was carnage. Tables overturned, bottles shattered, blood pooling on the expensive carpet. 3 of Dominique's men were on the ground, dead or dying. The other 2 had their hands up, surrounded by Min Jae's people. Dominique himself sat in his chair, very much alive, but with a gun pressed against his skull by Min Jae. Min Jae's suit was splattered with blood that probably wasn't his own. His expression was absolutely terrifying. Not angry, just cold. The kind of cold that made Amara understand exactly who he really was beneath the expensive clothes and educated voice. A killer. "You tried to ambush me in neutral territory," Min Jae said quietly. "That's a violation that requires response." "Wait," Dominique started. "I'm not going to kill you. That would be too easy." Min Jae's smile was worse than his rage. "But every Corsican operation in New York is now mine. Every route, every contact, every dollar. You violated the rules, so you lose the protection they provided. You can't—" "I already did. I made calls while my people were handling your men. By tomorrow morning, every syndicate in this city will know what you tried to do. You'll be marked as unreliable, dangerous to work with." Min Jae leaned closer. "And if you ever come near me or mine again, I won't be this merciful. Understood?" Dominique's face was gray. "Understood." Min Jae pulled back the gun and nodded to his men. "Let them go. Spread the word about what happened here." Within minutes, the casino was empty except for Min Jae's people and 3 bodies being dragged toward a back exit. Min Jae turned to Amara. "You saved my life." She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "I just translated." "No, you warned me in time to respond. Without that—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Thank you." Amara nodded because she couldn't form words. Jin appeared beside them. "We need to leave. Police will have heard the shots." They moved as a unit toward the exit, Min Jae's hand on Amara's back, guiding her through the aftermath of violence she had helped create. In the car, as they sped through Manhattan's empty streets, Amara stared at her hands. They were steady now. The shaking had stopped. She had just participated in something that ended with 3 people dead. And she didn't feel as horrified as she thought she should. That scared her more than the gunfire. Min Jae sat beside her, making calls in Korean, managing the fallout. When he finally hung up, he turned to her. "You did well. People died. People who tried to kill me. That's different." "Is it?" "Yes." His voice was firm. "In our world, yes." Our world. When had it become that? When had she stopped being a waitress forced into this life and started being someone who participated in it? Amara didn't have an answer. But as the car carried them back to the penthouse, she realized Jin had been wrong about one thing. She wasn't falling in love with Kang Min Jae. She had already fallen, and that meant there was no way back to who she used to be, no safety, no escape, only forward into darkness, hand in hand with the most dangerous man she had ever met. The war started 3 days after the casino. Not with gunfire, not with blood, with silence. Amara noticed it first at the bakery down the street from the penthouse. The way the owner's smile faltered when she walked in. The way his hand trembled slightly as he handed her the coffee she ordered every morning. She noticed it in the lobby of her father's medical facility, where security guards who used to nod politely now looked through her like she was made of glass. She noticed it in the way Jin's jaw tightened every time his phone buzzed. Something had shifted in the city's underworld, and everyone could feel it. "They're testing us," Min Jae said that night, standing at his windows with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched, "seeing how far they can push before we push back." "Who's they?" Amara sat curled on the leather sofa, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She hadn't slept properly since the shooting. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw bodies hitting the ground. "Everyone, the Corsicans lost face when word spread about the ambush. Now other families are wondering if I'm vulnerable. If the woman I'm protecting made me soft." He turned to look at her. "They're wrong." "Are they?" The question hung in the air between them. Minjae crossed the room and sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the scotch. What happened in that casino changed things. You're not just under my protection anymore. You're part of the infrastructure. You saved my life, which means you have value beyond what I assigned you. Value. The word tasted bitter. That's what I am now? An asset? In my world, that's the highest compliment. His dark eyes searched her face. But that's not all you are. Not to me. Amar's breath caught. Minjae. Her phone buzzed, then again, then continuously. She picked it up, frowning at the unknown number flashing across the screen. Against her better judgment, she answered. Hello? Heavy breathing, then a voice she didn't recognize, thick with a Russian accent. You cost Dominique everything, little bird. Now we're going to cost you. The line went dead. Minjae was already on his feet, his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders in Korean. Jin appeared from the hallway within seconds, 3 other guards materializing behind him. Lock down the building, Minjae commanded. Triple the detail on her father. I want eyes on every entrance, every elevator, every goddamn stairwell. Already done, Jin said. But boss? What? Jin's expression was grim. There's a problem. Maz. The problem was Victoria Chen. Minjae's former companion, the socialite who had mocked Amara that first night at Noir Elise, had been found dead in her penthouse that morning. Overdose, the initial report said. But the crime scene photos that Jin pulled up on his tablet told a different story. Staged. Professional. A message. They're going after everyone connected to you, Jin said quietly, the 4 of them huddled in Minjae's office. Victoria wasn't even important, but she was visible, public. They're making examples. Amara felt sick. She's dead because of what happened at the casino? She's dead because she was seen with me. Minjae's voice was cold, but she could hear the rage beneath it. They're trying to isolate me by eliminating anyone in my orbit. Who's doing this? The Calabrese family. Minjae pulled up a file on his computer. They're Italian, old money, old grudges. I destroyed their debt collection operation when I bought out Harbor Financial to protect you. Apparently that wasn't something they were willing to forgive. The floor tilted beneath Amar's feet. This is because of me. This is because they're opportunistic parasites who saw weakness where none exists. Minjae's jaw was tight. But yes, they're using you as justification. Then send me away. Give them what they want. They don't want you gone. They want me humiliated, broken. Sending you away just proves they were right about you being a weakness. He stood, pacing like a caged animal. No, we end this completely. Jin cleared his throat. There's more. Marcus Laurent was found in the Hudson this morning, tortured first. Someone wanted information from him. Marcus, the French businessman who had been at that first dinner. Amar remembered his awkward laugh, the way he had tried to impress Dominique. Dead now. Because he had been in the same room as her. What information? Minjae asked. We don't know yet, but if they got him to talk… Jin didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. If Marcus had given up details about Minjae's operations, about his vulnerabilities, about the people he protected, then this wasn't just a war, it was an execution. The attacks escalated over the next week. A warehouse fire in Red Hook destroyed 3 months of inventory. A shipping container full of electronics disappeared from the Newark docks. 2 of Minjae's lieutenants were jumped outside a restaurant in Koreatown. They survived, but barely. Each incident was calculated, precise, designed to bleed Minjae's empire slowly while making him look incompetent to his allies. Amara watched him work 18-hour days, making calls, moving money, repositioning assets. He barely ate, barely slept. The exhaustion showed in the sharp lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. She tried to help where she could, translating documents, sitting in on meetings, becoming the extra set of eyes he needed. But mostly she felt useless, a liability he was too stubborn to admit. 10 days after Victoria's death, Amar's father called her in a panic. Someone tried to access my room, he said, his voice shaking. Security stopped them. But Amara, what the hell is going on? They're saying it wasn't a random attempt. They're saying someone specifically asked for my room number. Amara's blood ran cold. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? No, but Jesus Christ, baby. Who are these people? What did you get involved in? She couldn't answer that question. Didn't know how to explain that his daughter had somehow become a central figure in a criminal war she barely understood. I'm fixing it, she said instead. Just stay there. Don't leave the facility. You'll what? Amara, you need to go to the police. The police can't help with this. Then who can? She hung up before she had to answer. Min-jae found her 20 minutes later, sitting on the bathroom floor with her knees pulled to her chest, trying not to fall apart. He knelt in front of her without speaking, just waited until she could look at him. They tried to get to my father, she said flatly. I know, Jin told me. We're moving him again. Somewhere not even you will know the location. That's not the point, her voice cracked. The point is, they're going to keep trying. They're going to keep hurting people until they get what they want. Which is me destroyed. Which is me. Amara met his eyes. I'm the weapon they're using against you, so remove the weapon. No. Min-jae, no? He said it with such finality that she stopped breathing. You think I haven't considered it? You think I don't lie awake at night weighing your life against my empire? His hands clenched into fists. But sending you away won't stop this now. It's gone too far. They'll hunt you down just to prove they can, just to send a message. The only way you survive is if we end them first. How? I don't know yet. For the first time since she'd met him, Min-jae looked uncertain. But I'm working on it. Basenk. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Min-jae's tech specialists, a young woman named Sarah, who managed his digital security, discovered something in the Calabrese family's financial records. Money moving through a series of shell companies, all leading back to a single offshore account. But the account wasn't owned by the Calabrese family. It was owned by someone in Min-jae's own organization. The realization hit the room like a bomb. Someone's been feeding them information, Sarah said quietly, her laptop screen casting blue light across her face. For at least 6 months. Financial records, shipment schedules, security details. Everything they'd need to orchestrate this. Min-jae's expression went absolutely still. Who? I don't know yet. The account is buried under multiple layers, but whoever it is has high-level access. It's someone in your inner circle. Amara watched Min-jae's face transform. Not into rage, into something colder, more dangerous. The look of a man realizing he'd been betrayed by someone he trusted. Find them, he said quietly. I don't care what it takes. Find them. It took Sarah 3 days. 3 days of Min-jae becoming increasingly paranoid, questioning everyone, trusting no one. 3 days of meetings held in different locations with rotating security, of encrypted phones and coded language. 3 days of watching him unravel. When Sarah finally called them to the office at 2 in the morning, Amara knew it was bad from the look on her face. I found the account owner, Sarah said, but you're not going to like it. She turned her laptop around. The name on the screen made Amara's stomach drop. Jin Park. Min-jae stared at the screen for a long moment, his expression unreadable. No. I triple-checked. The account traces back to a property in Queens registered under his mother's maiden name. The payment started 8 months ago, right after. Sarah hesitated. After what? Min-jae's voice was dangerously soft. After you were arrested in Seoul and released on diplomatic pressure. The Korean authorities wanted to prosecute you for racketeering. Jin was with you when it happened. Amar remembered Min-jae mentioning that trip. A brief comment about legal trouble that was resolved quickly, nothing to worry about. But apparently, there was something to worry about. Min-jae pulled out his phone and made a call. Jin, office, now. He hung up and turned to Amara. Get out. What? Leave. I don't want you here for this. Min-jae. Amara. He looked at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Please, just go. She went. But she didn't go far. Just to the outer office, where she could hear raised voices through the door. Jin arrived 5 minutes later, looking exhausted but alert. He passed Amara with a slight nod and entered Min-jae's office. The door closed. For a moment, silence. Then Min-jae's voice, low and lethal. How long have you been selling me out? Amara's heart stopped. What are you talking about? Jin sounded genuinely confused. The Calabrese family, the attacks, the information leaks. A pause. The offshore account in your mother's name. Longer silence this time. When Jin finally spoke, his voice was different, flatter. Ah, that single syllable confirmed everything. Why? Min-jae's voice cracked. You've been with me for 12 years. You're my brother. Why? Because you were supposed to die in Seoul. Jin said it matter-of-factly. The Korean authorities had everything. Witnesses, evidence, financial records. You should have gone to prison for 20 years, but then you made one phone call and suddenly all the charges disappeared, just like that. So I realized you had protection I didn't know about, resources I couldn't account for, which meant you had been lying to me, keeping secrets. Jin's tone hardened. We were supposed to be equals, brothers, but you were always one step ahead, weren't you? Always had contingencies I wasn't part of. That's how you stay alive in this world. That's how you stay paranoid and alone. A pause. The Calabrese family approached me 6 months ago, said they wanted information, just small things at first. Shipment schedules, meeting locations. Nothing that would really hurt you. Nothing that would hurt me. Min-jae's voice rose. They killed Victoria. They tortured Marcus. They tried to kidnap Amara's father. How the fuck is that nothing? That wasn't supposed to happen. For the first time, Jin sounded defensive. The plan was to pressure you into sharing territory, make you less aggressive about expansion. The Calabreses weren't supposed to target civilians. But they did. Yes, they did. Jin exhaled, and by the time I realized how far they were willing to go, I was already in too deep. They had evidence of my betrayal. I couldn't back out without exposing myself. So you just kept feeding them information, kept letting them destroy everything I built. I kept trying to minimize the damage while protecting myself. Jin's voice hardened again. And honestly, part of me stopped caring, because I watched you become obsessed with that waitress, watched you burn resources protecting someone who isn't even part of our world, watched you make yourself vulnerable for a woman you barely know. Amar's hands clenched into fists. She saved my life, Min-jae said quietly. She made you weak. Jin spat the words. The old you would have sent her away the moment she became a liability. But instead, you bought entire companies to erase her debt. You started a war with the Corsicans to protect her reputation. You're bleeding money and men and territory because you can't admit that caring about someone is a luxury you can't afford. Get out. Min-jae, get out. The words were absolute. Before I do something I regret. Footsteps. The door opened. Jin emerged, his face pale. He saw Amara sitting there and stopped. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You seem like a decent person. You didn't deserve to be dragged into this. Amara stood, rage burning through her shock. You betrayed him. I betrayed a version of him that stopped existing the moment he met you. Jin's expression was sad. The man I followed would have survived this. The man in there? I don't know anymore. He walked away, and Amara heard the elevator ding. Then silence. She stood in the empty office, her mind racing, trying to process what she'd just heard. Jin had been feeding information to their enemies for 6 months. Every attack, every death, every near miss. All of it traced back to someone Min-jae had trusted like family. Because of her. Jin was right. She had made Min-jae vulnerable. Amara pushed open the office door. Min-jae stood at his windows, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. In his right hand, he held a gun. Did you know? He asked without turning around. No, I swear. I wasn't asking if you were involved. I was asking if you knew I was going to let him leave. His voice was hollow. 12 years, Amara. I've known him since we were kids in Seoul. He saved my life in Tokyo. Stood beside me through every war, every betrayal, every impossible situation. He finally turned, and the devastation on his face made her chest ache. And I just let him walk away. What else could you do? I could have put a bullet in his head. He said it flatly. That's what the old me would have done. What a smart leader would do, because now he's a walking security risk who knows everything about my operation. But you didn't. No, because apparently Jin was right. I have gone soft. Min-jae set the gun down on his desk with exaggerated care. And that's going to get us all killed. We'll figure it out. How? He turned on her, and for the first time she saw real anger directed at her. How do we figure this out, Amara? My second in command just defected to my enemies. He knows every safe house, every contact, every weakness. The Calabrese family now has a complete map of my entire empire. His voice rose. And I let it happen because I was too busy protecting you to notice my own brother selling me out. The words hit like a slap. That's not fair, Amara said quietly. Isn't it? You heard him. Everything started falling apart when I started caring about you. Maybe if I had just left you in that fucking restaurant. Don't. Her voice shook. Don't you dare blame this on me. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming myself for being stupid enough to think I could have both. The empire and the woman. Power and love. He laughed bitterly. Turns out Jin was right. It's a luxury I can't afford. So what are you saying? Min-jae met her eyes, and what she saw there broke something inside her. I'm saying maybe you should have taken my original offer. New city, new identity, new life. Without you. Yes. Is that what you want? What I want stopped mattering the moment Jin walked out that door. Min-jae turned back to the window. Right now, I need to focus on survival, rebuilding, damage control. I don't have the bandwidth to... He stopped. Amara waited, but he didn't finish. To what? She pressed. To care about me? To protect me? To keep me alive? To keep us both alive while trying to juggle this. He sounded exhausted. Amara, I'm barely holding this together. My organization is compromised. My enemies know everything, and the one person I trusted more than anyone just handed them the keys to destroying me. He finally looked at her again. I can't do this. Not now. The rejection hurt worse than the gunfire in the casino. Okay, Amara said quietly. Okay? You're right. This is too much. I'm too much. I get it. She moved toward the door. I'll pack my things. Where will you go? I don't know. Does it matter? She turned back. You're cutting me loose to save yourself. Fine. I understand the math. But don't pretend you're doing it for me. Amara. No. You said what you needed to say. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. I hope you survive this, Min-jae. I really do. She walked out before he could respond. Patrol. She made it as far as the penthouse before her phone rang. Unknown number. Again. This time, she didn't hesitate. What? Miss Vale. The voice was smooth, American, unfamiliar. My name is Anthony Calabrese. I believe we have some things to discuss. Amara's blood turned to ice. I have nothing to say to you. No? Not even if I told you I could end this war tonight? Return everything to normal? Let you go back to your quiet little life serving soup to billionaires? What do you want? To meet. Just you and me. No weapons, no guards. Just a conversation. You're insane if you think, I'm offering you a way out, Miss Vale. The only way out. Because right now, Kang Min-jae is finished. Jin gave us everything we need to dismantle his empire piece by piece. Within a month, he'll be dead or in prison. But you? A pause. You I'm willing to let walk away if you cooperate. Cooperate how? Meet me tomorrow night, 10 p.m. The address will be texted to you. Come alone. We talk. You give me what I want, then you disappear and never come back to New York. His voice hardened. Or don't come, and I'll make sure your father is found in pieces scattered across 5 boroughs. Your choice. The line went dead. Amara stood frozen in the elevator, her reflection staring back at her from the polished doors. This was it. The moment where she had to decide who she actually was. The waitress who wanted to disappear? Or the woman who had learned to survive in Min-jae's world? The elevator reached the penthouse floor. The doors opened. Min-jae stood in the entrance, clearly having followed her up. Don't leave. Not like this. Why not? You just told me you can't do this anymore. I know. He ran his hands through his hair, frustration and exhaustion warring on his face. But I can't just let you walk away either. Not when what? Not when I'm in love with you. The words came out raw and desperate. There. I said it. I'm in love with you. and it's destroying everything, and I don't know how to fix it." Amara's breath caught. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. The text from Anthony Calabrese contained a single address in the Bronx. "Who was that?" Min-jae asked. She could tell him, should tell him, let him know the Calabrese family had just invited her to a meeting. But Min-jae was already drowning, already pushed to his breaking point. If she told him about the meeting, he'd try to stop her, or come with her, or do something reckless that would get him killed. And hadn't he just said he couldn't handle this anymore? Maybe it was time she stopped being someone else's problem. Maybe it was time she became the solution. "Just spam," Amara lied. "Listen, you need to focus on your empire, on fixing what Jin broke. I'll figure out my own situation." "Amara." She kissed him, hard and desperate, pouring everything she couldn't say into that kiss. When she pulled back, tears were finally streaming down her face. "I love you too," she whispered. "That's why I'm doing this." She walked past him into the penthouse before he could stop her. Tomorrow night, she would meet Anthony Calabrese, alone. And she would end this war the only way she knew how, by giving him what he wanted, herself. Damn-it. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Min-jae was gone most of it, meeting with what was left of his organization, trying to rebuild trust and security. Amara spent the hours packing carefully, writing letters she knew she'd probably never send. One to her father, explaining everything. One to Min-jae, telling him the truth about the meeting. She sealed them both and left them on the dining table. At 9 p.m., she called a car service. Not one of Min-jae's, something independent and anonymous. She wore dark clothes, pulled her hair back, tried to look unremarkable. The address was an abandoned warehouse in Hunts Point, exactly the kind of location where people went to die. Amara almost laughed at the cliché. The car dropped her 2 blocks away. She walked the rest, her hands shaking, her mind cycling through every possible outcome. Most of them ended with her dead. But if her death stopped the war, stopped the attacks on her father, gave Min-jae a chance to rebuild without her being a liability, maybe that was acceptable. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and silent. A single black car was parked outside, expensive and menacing. Amara took a deep breath and pushed open the rusted door. Inside, the space was mostly empty except for a few chairs arranged in the center under a single hanging light. A man sat in one chair, older than she expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and an expensive suit. Anthony Calabrese. "Miss Vale," he smiled. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "You threatened my father. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has choices. You chose this one." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." Amara sat, her muscles coiled tight, ready to run or fight or do whatever survival demanded. "Let me be direct," Anthony said. "I want Kang Min-jae destroyed. Not just his empire. Him. I want him broken, humiliated, and buried." "Why?" "Because he cost me money when he bought out Harbor Financial. Because he made me look weak in front of my organization when he protected you. Because he's become too powerful and too unpredictable, and I can't allow that." Anthony leaned forward. "But mostly? Because I can. Because that's how this world works." "What do you want from me?" "Information, locations, weak points Jin might have missed." His smile widened. "And I want you to go back to him. Pretend this conversation never happened. Feed me everything I need to finish him off." Amara's stomach turned. "You want me to betray him?" "I want you to survive. This is how you do it." "And if I refuse?" "Then I kill your father tonight. I kill you tomorrow. And I kill Kang the day after that." Anthony's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "I'm giving you a chance to save 2 out of 3 lives. Most people don't get that option." Amara stared at him, her mind racing. This was the twist, the impossible choice: betray Min-jae to save herself and her father, or refuse and watch everyone she loved die. But as she sat there looking at Anthony Calabrese's smug face, something shifted inside her. She thought about the casino, about pulling Min-jae out of that ambush, about learning to survive in his world, about becoming someone who didn't just hide from violence but faced it. She thought about Jin's words, about how she had changed Min-jae. Maybe Jin was right, but maybe that wasn't a weakness. Maybe that was power. "No," Amara said quietly. Anthony blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no, I'm not betraying him. I'm not feeding you information. I'm not doing anything you want. She stood, her fear crystallizing into something harder. You can threaten me all you want. You can kill my father. You can kill me. But I'm not giving you Min Jae. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She turned to walk away and heard the distinctive sound of a gun being cocked behind her. I really hoped you'd be smarter than this, Anthony said sadly. Amara closed her eyes. This was it. The end she'd known was coming since the moment she'd stepped into this warehouse. But at least she'd die as herself. Not as a traitor. Not as someone who had compromised everything she'd become. Do it, she said quietly. The gunshot was deafening. But Amara didn't fall. She spun around in confusion and saw Anthony Calabrese slumped in his chair, blood spreading across his expensive suit, his eyes wide with shock. Behind him, stepping out of the shadows, was Jin, holding a smoking gun. You really are too brave for your own good, Jin said tiredly. Amara couldn't breathe. What? I never actually defected. Jin lowered the weapon. The account Sarah found? I created it 6 months ago as bait, to see who in our organization would try to access it, who would sell information if they thought they could profit. Anthony took the bait, started paying for intel that I carefully fed him, just enough truth mixed with enough lies to keep him confident. But the attacks were real. Had to be to maintain the deception, but nothing that would cause permanent damage. Jin's expression was grim. I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell anyone except Min Jae. It had to look real for Anthony to commit fully to his plans. So this whole time, we've been running a counterintelligence operation, and you just walked right into the middle of it. Jin pulled out his phone. Boss, she's here. Anthony's down. We're clear. A muffled response. Jin hung up and looked at Amara. He's 5 minutes out. Been parked 3 blocks away since you left, tracking your phone. Ready to burn this entire neighborhood down if anything went wrong. He knew I was coming here? He found your letters an hour after you left. Jin almost smiled. You really thought he'd just let you sacrifice yourself? Amara's knees gave out. She sat down hard on the concrete floor, adrenaline crashing through her system. She'd come here to die. Instead, she'd just witnessed the end of the war she'd thought she was preventing. 5 minutes later, exactly as promised, Min Jae burst through the warehouse door with 20 armed men behind him. His eyes found Amara immediately. In 3 strides, he crossed the space and pulled her to her feet, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Did anyone? I'm fine. Her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. Jin shot him. I know. He was supposed to. Min Jae cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. You weren't supposed to be here. You weren't supposed to put yourself in danger like this. I was trying to protect you. By offering yourself up as a sacrifice. That's not protection, that's suicide. His voice cracked. Don't you understand? Losing you would destroy me worse than losing everything else combined. But you said, I said I was scared. I said I didn't know how to balance it all. I never said I wanted you gone. He pulled her against his chest, and she could feel his heart hammering. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I made you think that was the answer. Amara buried her face in his shirt and finally let herself fall apart. Around them, Min Jae's men were already cleaning up the scene, removing Anthony's body, erasing evidence. Business as usual in a world that thrived on violence and deception. But for just a moment, in the center of that warehouse, Amara let herself be held by the most dangerous man in New York. The man she had somehow, impossibly, survived loving. It's over? She whispered against his chest. Almost. Min Jae pulled back enough to look at her. The Calabrese family will retaliate when they find out their boss is dead, but without Anthony, they're fractured. We can handle them. We? Yes. He said it firmly. We. You and me. Because you're not going anywhere, and I'm done pretending I can do this without you. Jin cleared his throat nearby. Hate to interrupt, but we need to move. Police will be here in 10 minutes. They moved as a unit toward the exit, Min Jae keeping Amara close, his arm around her shoulders like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. In the car, as they drove back through the Bronx toward Manhattan, Amara finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. How long have you and Jin been planning this? Since the day after the casino. Min-jae stared out the window. We knew there'd be retaliation, knew they'd come after you specifically, so we set a trap. Made it look like Jin betrayed me, fed false information that would draw them out, waited for them to commit fully enough that we could end it permanently. You could have told me. And risked you giving it away? You're brave, Amara. You're brilliant. But you're not trained for deep cover operations. He finally looked at her. I needed you to react authentically, to be genuinely afraid, to do exactly what you did tonight. Walk into a death trap? Prove that you couldn't be turned. Min-jae's voice softened. Anthony thought he could buy you or scare you into betrayal. He needed to believe that. If he'd suspected the setup, he would have gone underground and we'd never have gotten another chance. So you used me as bait. I used your integrity as proof that you were exactly what you appeared to be. Someone who couldn't be compromised. He reached for her hand. I hated every second of it, but it was the only way to end this without more bodies stacking up. Amara squeezed his hand, too exhausted to be angry, too relieved to be critical. They'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, they'd both survived. But as the car carried them back toward the penthouse, back toward whatever came next, Amara realized something fundamental had changed tonight. She had walked into that warehouse willing to die for Min-jae, and he had orchestrated an entire counterintelligence operation to make sure she didn't have to. They were bound now. Completely. Irreversibly. For better or worse, Amara Vale had become something she never imagined. Not a waitress, not a victim, not even just a survivor. She had become the queen standing beside a king in an empire built on blood and shadows. And there was no going back from that. Not ever. The retaliation came faster than anyone expected. 36 hours after Anthony Calabrese's body was found in that Bronx warehouse, his eldest son Marco declared war on every corner of Min-jae's empire. Not the careful, calculated attacks they'd been enduring. Full-scale war. Loud. Public. Devastating. Amara woke to the sound of explosions at 4 in the morning. The penthouse windows rattled in their frames, car alarms shrieking from the streets below. She rolled out of bed, her heart already racing, and found Min-jae standing at the windows, fully dressed, phone pressed to his ear. How many? He asked in Korean, his voice deadly calm. Whatever answer he received made his jaw tighten. He ended the call and turned to her. Get dressed. We're leaving. What happened? The Calabrese family just hit 3 of our warehouses simultaneously, 2 in Brooklyn, 1 in Queens. He was already moving, grabbing a go-bag from the closet. They're not trying to be subtle anymore. They want blood. Amara dressed in under 2 minutes, pulling on jeans and a dark sweater, shoving her feet into boots. Her hands shook as she tied the laces. This was different from before. She could feel it in the air itself. The way Min-jae's men moved through the penthouse with military precision. The way their faces had gone hard and empty. This was survival mode. Jin appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Cars are ready, but boss, we have a problem. Another one? Marco Calabrese just posted a message on every major underground network. He's offering $10 million for Amara Vale, dead or alive. Preferably alive. Jin's eyes flicked to her apologetically. He wants revenge for his father, and he's making it personal. The number hit Amara like a physical blow. $10 million. For her. How many people are going to come after that bounty? She asked quietly. In this city? Jin grimaced. Everyone. Min-jae grabbed her arm, not roughly but urgently. We're going to the safe house in Westchester, fortified, off the grid, defensible. You'll be protected until we end this. How do we end this? By killing Marco Calabrese before he kills us. The words were simple, final, the kind of statement that left no room for negotiation or mercy. They moved as a convoy through Manhattan's pre-dawn streets. 5 black SUVs with armed men in each, moving fast but not fast enough to draw police attention. Amara sat between Min-jae and Jin in the middle vehicle, watching the city blur past, wondering if she'd ever see it again. Her phone buzzed constantly. Unknown numbers. Texts with threats, offers, warnings. She turned it off completely. "They're using you to flush me out," Min-jae said without looking away from the window. "Marco knows I'll expose myself trying to protect you. He's betting on it. So don't protect me. Use me as bait." Both men turned to stare at her. "Are you insane?" Jin asked. "I'm strategic." Amara met Min-jae's eyes. "You said it yourself. Marco wants me alive, which means if I'm visible, he'll come personally to collect. And when he does, we kill him and end this." Min-jae finished the thought, his expression unreadable. "It's too dangerous. Everything is too dangerous now. At least this gives us control over when and where the confrontation happens." "She's not wrong," Jin said reluctantly. "If we hide her away, Marco will just keep hitting our operations until we're bled dry. But if we dangle the prize in front of him, no." Min-jae's voice was absolute. "I'm not using her as bait." "You already did," Amara said softly. "At the warehouse with Anthony. You used my integrity as proof I couldn't be turned. This is the same thing, except this time I'm choosing it." "That was different." "How?" "Because I knew the outcome. I controlled every variable. This," he gestured helplessly, "this is chaos. Too many things can go wrong." "Then make it less chaotic." Amara turned to face him fully. "You're the most dangerous strategist in New York. Figure it out." The convoy reached the Westchester safe house just as the sun started bleeding orange across the horizon. The property was massive, 20 acres of wooded land surrounding a stone mansion that looked like a fortress. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Security cameras covered every angle. Inside, Min-jae's lieutenants were already gathered in a war room that occupied the entire basement. Maps covered the walls. Laptops displayed feeds from across the city. Everyone looked exhausted and wired, running on adrenaline and coffee. Sarah, the tech specialist, looked up when they entered. "It's getting worse. The bounty on Amara just increased to 15 million, and Marco posted video proof that he has your shipping manifests from the last 6 months. He's threatening to release them to federal authorities unless you turn yourself in for a meeting." "He's trying to force your hand," one of the lieutenants said. "Make you choose between your freedom and your empire." Min-jae studied the screen silently. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. "Where's Marco right now?" "His family compound in Staten Island. Fortified. 20-plus men on site at all times." Sarah pulled up satellite images. "Impossible to breach without starting a bloodbath that would bring every law enforcement agency in the state down on us." "What if he came to us instead?" Min-jae asked quietly. The room went silent. Jin caught on first. "You want to use Amara's plan. I want to end this war in the next 48 hours, before more of our people die, before Marco bleeds us into irrelevance." Min-jae's eyes were hard. "So yes, we use Amara as bait, but on our terms, our location, our rules." "And if Marco smells the trap?" another lieutenant asked. "He won't, because he's arrogant and desperate. His father just died. He needs a win to prove himself to his organization. Capturing or killing Amara Vale gives him that." Min-jae turned to Sarah. "Can you leak a location? Make it look like accidental intelligence we didn't mean to expose?" "Give me an hour." "Do it." Min-jae looked around the room. "We're going to end this family permanently. No half measures. No mercy. Everyone understand?" The men nodded. Amara watched Min-jae transform into something she'd only glimpsed before. Not the man who held her at night. Not the one who spoke French over wine and debated philosophy. This was the crime lord, the king who commanded an empire built on violence and fear. This was the man the city whispered about in terror. And she was about to help him wage war. Assad. The plan came together with terrifying speed. They chose an abandoned shipping facility on the Brooklyn waterfront, one of Min-jae's properties that had been damaged in the earlier attacks. Isolated, defensible, perfect for an ambush. Sarah leaked the location through 3 different channels, making it look like careless communication between Min-jae's men. Within hours, the chatter confirmed that Marco had taken the bait. He was mobilizing his entire organization for an assault. "He'll bring at least 30 men," Jin said, studying the floor plans. "Maybe more. He wants overwhelming force." "Good. Let him feel confident." Min-jae marked positions on the map. "We'll have 40 men positioned here, here, and here. Sniper nests on these rooftops. Vehicles blocking every exit. When Marco arrives, we lock him in and finish it. And me? Amara asked. Min-jae looked at her for a long moment. You'll be visible in the main building, just long enough for Marco to commit fully. Then Jin gets you out through the underground tunnel before the shooting starts. What if he moves faster than you expect? He won't. But what if... Amara. Min-jae cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. I will not lose you. That's the one variable I will control absolutely. Understood? She nodded, even though fear was eating her alive from the inside. They spent the next 24 hours preparing, running drills, positioning men, building contingencies for every possible scenario. Amara trained with Jin on the escape route until she could navigate it blindfolded, learning every turn of the underground tunnel that led from the facility to a safe extraction point half a mile away. Stay low, move fast, don't stop for anything, Jin repeated for the 10th time. When I say go, you go. No hesitation, no looking back. I understand. Do you? Jin's expression was serious. Because once this starts, it's going to be chaos. Gunfire, explosions, people dying, and your instinct is going to be to help, to go back for Min-jae. But you can't. You have to trust that he'll make it out. What if he doesn't? Then I get you to safety and we regroup. That's the mission. Keep you alive. Everything else is secondary. Amara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. If she got herself killed trying to be a hero, it would destroy Min-jae worse than any bullet. The night before the ambush, she couldn't sleep, couldn't stop her mind from cycling through every possible way this could go wrong. She found Min-jae on the mansion's back terrace, staring out at the dark woods, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. You should be resting, he said without turning around. So should you. Can't. Too many variables to control. He finally looked at her, and the exhaustion on his face made her chest ache. I keep running the scenarios trying to account for every contingency, and every single one of them ends with you in danger. Then don't do this. Find another way. There is no other way. Marco won't stop until one of us is dead. This ends tomorrow, one way or another. He set down the glass and pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from what was coming. Promise me something. Anything. If this goes wrong. If I don't make it out. Promise me you'll run. Take the money I've set aside and disappear. New life, new identity. Somewhere Marco's people will never find you. Min-jae, promise me. Amara pulled back to look at him. I promise. But only if you promise me the same thing, that you'll survive this, that you'll make it out. I'll do everything I can. That's not a promise. It's the best I can give you. He kissed her forehead, then her lips, soft and desperate. I love you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. I love you too. Amara pressed her face against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, trying to memorize everything about this moment. Come back to me. Always. But they both knew that was a lie. Tomorrow, only one of them might walk away alive. The day of the ambush dawned gray and cold. They moved into position at the shipping facility by noon, hours before Marco was expected to arrive. The building was massive and hollow, rusted metal and broken concrete, the kind of place where bodies disappeared and no one asked questions. Perfect for a war. Min-jae's men positioned themselves with military precision. Snipers on the rooftops, teams covering every entrance, vehicles ready to block exits. Sarah coordinated everything from a mobile command center 3 blocks away, watching feeds from dozens of cameras. Amara stood in the center of the main floor, exactly where she was supposed to be visible from outside. She wore a dark coat over jeans, her hair pulled back, trying to look scared and alone. She didn't have to try very hard. Jin stayed close, hidden behind a pillar where he could reach her in seconds. You're doing great, he said quietly through the earpiece they had all been fitted with. Just remember, the moment I say go, I run. I know. Min-jae's voice crackled through the comms from his position on the second floor. Marco's convoy just left Staten Island. ETA 22 minutes. Amara's pulse spiked. This was really happening. All teams, final positions, Min-jae commanded. No one moves until I give the order. We let them commit fully. Wait for my signal. 22 minutes felt like hours. Amara stood in that empty building, surrounded by shadows and steel, and tried not to fall apart. She thought about her father, safe now in a secure facility somewhere she couldn't compromise even under torture. Thought about the life she'd had 4 months ago, invisible and struggling but simple. That woman was gone forever. In her place stood someone she barely recognized, someone who had learned to survive in a world of violence, someone who had fallen in love with a monster and become something darker because of it. Convoy spotted. Sarah's voice came through the comms. 5 vehicles, approximately 30 men. They're approaching from the south entrance. Copy that. Min-jae's voice was calm. Hold positions. Amara heard the engines before she saw the vehicles. Heard doors slamming, footsteps echoing through the empty spaces, voices shouting orders in Italian. Then Marco Calabrese walked through the main entrance, flanked by armed men, and his eyes locked onto her instantly. He was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with his father's silver-streaked hair and the same cruel smile. He wore an expensive suit despite the dirty setting, as if appearances mattered even in a place meant for killing. Amara Vale, he said, his voice echoing. The woman who destroyed my father. I didn't kill him. Amara kept her voice steady, kept herself visible and vulnerable exactly like they'd planned. No, but you were the reason. The weakness that made Kong careless. Marco walked closer, his men spreading out behind him. Where is he? Where's the coward hiding? Right here. Min-jae's voice boomed from the second floor. He stepped into view at the railing, backlit by the dim light filtering through broken windows. Behind him, dozens of his men emerged from the shadows, weapons raised. Marco's face went white as he realized the trap. You really thought I'd just hand her over? Min-jae asked. That I'd be stupid enough to leave her unprotected? You arrogant! Marco spun, gesturing to his men. Kill them! Kill them all! Everything exploded at once. Gunfire erupted from every direction. The building became a war zone instantly, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like lightning, the sound deafening and overwhelming. Go! Jin shouted, grabbing Amara's arm. She ran. Jean dragged her toward the back of the building, toward the hidden door that led to the tunnels. Behind them, men were screaming, dying, the violence so intense it felt like the world was ending. They reached the door. Jin yanked it open, and a bullet caught him in the shoulder. He went down hard, blood spreading across his chest. No! Amara dropped to her knees beside him. Go! Jin gasped, his face twisted in pain. Tunnel, now! I'm not leaving you. That's an order. He shoved her toward the opening. Get to safety. Tell Min-jae... He coughed, blood on his lips. Tell him I'm sorry I wasn't faster. Amara's vision blurred with tears. She wanted to argue, wanted to drag him with her, but more gunfire erupted close by. Someone shouted that they'd spotted the woman. She ran. Into the tunnel, into darkness, her boots splashing through standing water, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, the sounds of war continued. Endless, terrible. The death of everything she'd tried to protect. The tunnel stretched for what felt like miles. Amara ran until her lungs burned, until her legs felt like they'd give out, until she finally emerged into an abandoned subway station where one of Min-jae's drivers was waiting. We need to go, he said urgently, pulling her toward a car. What about Min-jae? What about Jin? I don't know. We have orders to get you to the secondary safe house. That's all I know. They drove through Brooklyn at terrifying speed, weaving through traffic, running red lights. Amara's phone buzzed constantly, but she was too afraid to look, afraid of what news might be waiting. The secondary safe house was a nondescript apartment in Park Slope. The driver hustled her inside, checked every room, then positioned himself by the door. Stay away from windows, he instructed. Don't make any calls. Wait for contact. From who? Whoever survives. The words hung in the air, brutal and honest. Amara sank onto the couch, her whole body shaking. She'd left Jin bleeding on the ground, left Min-jae in the middle of a firefight, run like a coward while people died protecting her. Minutes passed like hours. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Amara's hand shook as she answered. Hello? Miss Vale? The voice was smooth, unfamiliar, American. My name is Detective Ryan Martinez, NYPD. I'm calling about Kang Min-jae. Her heart stopped. What about him? I'm afraid I have bad news. But I must see Amara's vision tunneled. The apartment disappeared. All she could hear was static and that detective's voice, professional and detached, delivering words that felt like bullets. There was a massive shootout at a shipping facility in Brooklyn approximately 90 minutes ago. Multiple casualties. We're still processing the scene, but I need to inform you that Mr. Kang was among those found. Is he alive? She could barely form the words. A pause. Too long. Miss Vale, I think it would be best if you came down to the station. There are some questions we need to ask you, and… She hung up and stood there frozen, her mind refusing to process what she'd just heard. Min Jae was dead. He had to be. The detective wouldn't have called otherwise, wouldn't have dodged the question. The most dangerous man in New York, the crime lord who commanded an empire, the man who had promised he'd come back to her. Gone. The driver was staring at her. Miss Vale, who was that? The police. Her voice sounded distant, disconnected from her body. They found Min Jae. They said… She couldn't finish. The driver's face went pale. He pulled out his phone, started making calls in rapid Korean. No one answered. We need to move, he said finally. If the police have the scene, if they're calling you, that means Marco might have won. And if Marco won, then I'm still worth $15 million. Yes. Amara's grief crystallized into something harder, colder. Min Jae was gone. Jin was probably dead too. The empire they'd built was collapsing, but she was still alive, and Marco Calabrese had destroyed everything she loved. No, Amara said quietly. The driver frowned. No what? No, we're not running. She stood, her hands steady now, rage burning through the shock. Take me to the command center, where Sarah is. Miss Vale, that's an order. Amara's voice came out sharp and absolute, in a tone she'd learned from watching Min Jae command rooms full of killers. I need to know what actually happened. I need to know who survived, and then I need to finish what Min Jae started. The driver hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. They drove to the mobile command center, a converted delivery truck parked in an industrial area of Red Hook. Sarah sat inside, surrounded by screens, her face streaked with tears, her hands flying across keyboards. She looked up when Amara entered. Oh, thank God. You're alive. What happened? Amara demanded. Where's Min Jae? Sarah's face crumpled. I don't know. The feeds went down halfway through the firefight. Someone jammed the signals. I've been trying to reach anyone, but… She gestured helplessly at the screens, showing nothing but static. I think Marco had an electromagnetic pulse device. Took out all our communications and cameras at once. So we don't know who's alive? No. Police locked down the scene 20 minutes ago. I've been monitoring their radio chatter. They're reporting at least 40 casualties, bodies everywhere, but they haven't released names. The detective who called me said they found Min Jae. Found him how? Alive? Dead? Arrested? Sarah grabbed Amara's hands. What exactly did they say? Amara replayed the conversation in her head. The detective had been careful with his words, had said Min Jae was among those found, had asked her to come to the station. He didn't explicitly say dead, she realized. He just implied, then he might be alive. Sarah's eyes lit up with desperate hope. Under arrest, maybe. Or injured. But alive. Or it's a trap. Maybe. But we won't know unless we check. Sarah pulled up a new screen. I can access the NYPD database. It'll take time, but I can find out if Min Jae was arrested or taken to a hospital. Do it. While Sarah worked, Amara paced the cramped space, her mind racing. If Min Jae was alive but arrested, the police would have leverage. Evidence, testimony from the scene. They could bring down his entire empire. Unless someone protected it first. Unless someone became exactly what Min Jae had spent months teaching her to be. Dangerous, strategic, ruthless. Got something, Sarah said suddenly. Min Jae wasn't arrested, but there's an entry for a John Doe matching his description taken to Brooklyn Medical Center. Critical condition, gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. Amar's heart lurched. He's alive. Barely. The notes say surgery is ongoing, prognosis uncertain. Sarah looked up. But if the police figure out who he is, they'll move him to a secure facility as soon as he's stable. We have a very small window. Then we use it. Amara turned to the driver. How many men do we have available? People who weren't at the shipping facility. maybe 20, scattered across the city. Call them all. I need 10 men at Brooklyn Medical within the hour, armed but discreet. We're extracting Min-jae before the police realize who they have. Sarah stared at her. That's insane. Hospital security, police presence, cameras everywhere? I don't care. Amar's voice was steel. I'm not leaving him to die in a hospital bed or spend the rest of his life in prison. We're getting him out. And if he doesn't survive the extraction, then at least he'll die free. The driver was already on the phone, mobilizing what was left of Min-jae's organization. Sarah pulled up blueprints of the hospital, mapping potential routes, and Amara stood in the center of that command truck, feeling something fundamental shift inside her. She had come to New York as a waitress trying to survive. She had become a woman trying to love a dangerous man. Now she was becoming something else entirely, the queen who would burn the entire city down before letting her king fall. Get me a weapon, she said quietly, and someone teach me how to use it properly. Sarah's eyes widened. You're going in? Yes. Amara, you're not trained for this. You're not... I'm exactly what I need to be. Amara met her eyes. I'm the woman who loves Kang Min-jae, and I'm going to save him or die trying. Within 40 minutes, they had a plan. Within an hour, Amara stood outside Brooklyn Medical Center, wearing scrubs stolen from a uniform supply company, her hair tucked under a surgical cap, a stolen ID badge clipped to her chest. Around her, Min-jae's men positioned themselves in vehicles and on street corners, ready to move on her signal. This was insane. This was impossible. This was the only option left. Amara took a deep breath and walked through the hospital's emergency entrance, her heart pounding, her hands steady. She had 4 hours until sunrise. 4 hours to extract a dying crime lord from a building full of police and witnesses. 4 hours to become the kind of woman who could pull off the impossible, the kind of woman who deserved to stand beside a king. And as she disappeared into the fluorescent-lit corridors of Brooklyn Medical Center, Amara Vale made herself a promise. She would save Min-jae, or she would die beside him. There was no other option, not anymore. The hospital corridors smelled like disinfectant and fear. Amara walked with practiced confidence, her stolen badge swinging from her chest, her eyes scanning every face she passed. Security guards at the nurses' station, police officers stationed near the elevators, cameras mounted in every corner. She was walking into a trap she'd built herself. But Min-jae was somewhere in this building, dying, and that was the only thing that mattered. Through the earpiece hidden beneath her surgical cap, Sarah's voice guided her. ICU is on the 4th floor, West Wing, but there are 2 officers outside the secure ward. You'll need a distraction. Already working on it, one of Min-jae's men replied. His voice was tight with pain. He'd been at the shipping facility, had barely survived. I'm in position at the south entrance. Give me 30 seconds. Amara reached the stairwell and climbed, her legs burning, her pulse hammering in her throat. She'd never done anything like this before. Never broken into a hospital, never extracted anyone from police custody. Every instinct screamed that she was going to get caught, get killed, get Min-jae killed. But she kept moving. On the 4th floor, she paused at the stairwell door, watching through the narrow window. 2 officers stood guard outside the ICU entrance, both alert, both armed. There was no way past them without... The fire alarm erupted. Sirens blared through the building, red lights flashing. The officers exchanged confused looks, then one of them spoke into his radio. 30 seconds later, they both moved toward the stairwell, toward Amara. She pressed herself against the wall as they rushed past, heading down to investigate. The moment they disappeared, she slipped through the door and ran for the ICU. The secure ward was locked, requiring badge access. Amara swiped the stolen ID, praying it would work. The light turned green. She pushed through into a dimly lit corridor lined with private rooms. Machines beeped rhythmically. Nurses rushed past, responding to the fire alarm, barely glancing at her. 3rd room on the left, Sarah said through the earpiece. That's where the John Doe matching Min-jae's description is listed. Amara reached the door. Her hand trembled as she pushed it open. The room was dark except for the glow of medical monitors. And there, in the hospital bed, connected to tubes and wires and machines keeping him alive, was Kang Min-jae. He looked nothing like the man who had commanded empires. His face was gray, hollow. Bandages covered his chest and abdomen, stained with blood seeping through. An oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth. The heart monitor showed a weak, irregular rhythm. He was dying. Amara crossed the room on legs that barely held her, reaching for his hand. His skin was cold beneath her fingers. "Minjae," she whispered. "I'm here. I'm getting you out." His eyes fluttered open. Barely. Just enough to see her. Recognition flickered in his gaze, followed immediately by panic. He tried to shake his head, tried to speak behind the oxygen mask, but could only manage a weak, desperate sound. "Don't," Amara said firmly. "Don't tell me to leave you. Don't tell me it's too dangerous. I'm not listening." She turned to the monitors, her hands shaking as she started disconnecting wires. The machines began to alarm, their shrill warnings filling the room. "We have maybe 2 minutes before security responds," Sarah said through the earpiece. "Extraction team is at the service entrance. You need to move now." Amar grabbed the IV stand, kept the fluids running, and released the brake on Minjae's bed. He made another sound of protest, but she ignored it, pushing the bed toward the door. The corridor was chaos now. Nurses running to respond to multiple alarms, security trying to manage the evacuation. No one paid attention to one more medical transport moving through the confusion. Amara pushed the bed toward the service elevators, her muscles screaming, her mind focused on nothing but forward motion. Left turn, right turn, through double doors, past a nurse who barely glanced at her. The service elevator was empty. She shoved the bed inside and hit the button for the basement. As the doors closed, she heard shouting behind her. Someone had noticed. "They know," she said into the earpiece. "How long until—" The elevator doors opened onto the basement level. 3 of Minjae's men stood waiting with a gurney and medical equipment. They moved with terrifying efficiency, transferring Minjae from the hospital bed, maintaining his IV lines, checking his vital signs. "He's critical," one of them said, Lee, a former military medic. "He needs surgery, real surgery. He's not going to survive transport to a safe location." "Then we bring the surgery to him," Amar said. "Where's the nearest secure facility?" "Warehouse in Sunset Park, 15 minutes, but then that's where we're going." Amara looked at Minjae's gray face, at the blood still seeping through his bandages. Whatever it takes. They moved as a unit through the basement corridors, past laundry rooms and storage areas, finally emerging into a loading dock where a white van waited with its doors open. Behind them, alarms shrieked. Police radios crackled. Someone shouted to lock down all exits. They loaded Minjae into the van. Amara climbed in beside him while Lee started working, cutting away bandages, assessing damage. The van lurched into motion, tires squealing. Through the earpiece, Sarah's voice was panicked. "Police are mobilizing across Brooklyn. They have your van description. You have maybe 10 minutes before roadblocks go up everywhere. Tell the drivers to take back routes. No main streets." Amara gripped Minjae's hand, feeling his weak pulse beneath her fingers. "We're not losing him. Not now." The van careened through Brooklyn's industrial wasteland, weaving between abandoned buildings and empty lots. Amara braced herself against the wall while Lee worked frantically, inserting new IV lines, administering medications she didn't recognize. "He's got internal bleeding," Lee said grimly. 2 bullets hit major organs. "The hospital surgery was good but incomplete. He's deteriorating." "How long does he have?" "If we can't stop the bleeding, maybe an hour." Minjae's eyes opened again, fixing on Amara with desperate intensity. He pulled weakly at his oxygen mask. "Don't," she said. "Save your strength." But he kept pulling, finally dislodging it enough to speak. His voice was barely a whisper, wet and ragged. "You shouldn't have—" "I know, but I did anyway." Amara adjusted the mask gently. "You can yell at me about it later." "Amara—" He coughed, blood on his lips. "Marco, is he—" "I don't know. After the EMP, everything went dark. We lost contact with everyone." Minjae's hand tightened on hers with surprising strength. "If he's alive, you run. Promise me." "I'm not running from anyone anymore. Promise." His eyes were fierce despite the pain. "If I don't make it, you're making it." Amara's voice cracked. "You don't get to die after everything we've survived. You don't get to leave me alone in this world you dragged me into. I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. "For all of it. Don't apologize. Just live." The van skidded to a stop. They'd reached the warehouse. Minjae's men had converted a back office into a makeshift operating room. Medical supplies stolen from 3 different hospitals, portable lights, everything Lee needed to perform emergency surgery. They transferred Minji onto a steel table. Lee scrubbed up while his assistant, another former military medic named Park, prepped the anesthesia. "This is going to be rough," Lee warned. "I can keep him alive, but he needs a real hospital, real surgeons. Do what you can." Amara stepped back, giving them room to work. "That's all I'm asking." The surgery lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of Amara pacing the warehouse floor while Sarah monitored police chatter and Minjae's remaining men secured the perimeter. 3 hours of not knowing if Minjae would live or die. 3 hours of confronting exactly who she'd become. She'd kidnapped a man from police custody, stolen medical equipment, commanded a criminal organization, become the very thing she'd once feared, and she'd do it all again without hesitation. Somewhere during those 3 hours, Jin arrived. He looked like hell, his shoulder bandaged, his face pale from blood loss, moving stiffly. But he was alive. "You made it," Amara said, relief flooding through her. "Barely. Had to hide in the tunnels for 2 hours before I could surface." Jin studied her face. "You broke him out of a hospital." "Yes." "That was insane." "Yes." Jin smiled slightly. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have him." Amara glanced toward the operating room. "Is Marco dead?" "No." Jin's expression darkened. "He got away during the firefight. Police found him wounded but alive, took him into custody. He's claiming self-defense, saying Minjae ambushed him. The FBI is involved now. They want both of them." "How many did we lose?" 14 men, another 8 wounded." Jin's voice was heavy. "Marco lost more, 23 dead, the rest in custody. But Amara, this isn't over. Marco has lawyers, political connections. He'll spin this into a narrative where he's the victim and Minjae is the villain. Then we give them a different narrative." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." Before Jin could respond, Lee emerged from the operating room, still wearing bloody scrubs. His expression was exhausted but cautiously hopeful. "He's stable, barely. I removed the bullets, repaired what I could, stopped the internal bleeding." Lee pulled off his surgical mask. "But he needs real medical care. Blood transfusions, antibiotics, monitoring. I give him maybe 48 hours before complications kill him if we don't get him proper treatment." "Can he be moved?" "Not for at least 12 hours. And even then, only carefully." Amara nodded. "Then we have 12 hours to figure out our next move." She pushed into the operating room. Minjae lay on the table, breathing steadily now, his color slightly better. Still gray, still barely alive, but fighting. Always fighting. Amara pulled a chair beside the table and took his hand. "You're going to hate me when you wake up," she said softly. "But that's okay, as long as you wake up." Minjae regained consciousness 8 hours later. Amara was dozing in the chair when she felt his hand twitch. She jerked awake to find his eyes open, hazy with pain and medication, but aware. "Hey," she whispered. "You're insane," he croaked. Despite everything, she laughed. "You're welcome. The hospital, the police, all very angry at us, but you're alive and that's all that matters." She helped him drink water from a straw, watching him wince with each swallow. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot multiple times and then kidnapped from a hospital." Accurate assessment. Minjae's expression grew serious. "Marco?" "Alive. In custody. Talking to the FBI." Amara saw his jaw tighten. "We have a problem. He's spinning this as self-defense, claiming you lured him into a trap." "Which I did." "But he initiated the war, attacked our properties, put a bounty on my head." Amara leaned forward. "We have evidence of that, communications, financial records, witness testimony, which we can't use without admitting to criminal activity." Minjae closed his eyes. "He's going to walk, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life running or imprisoned. Not if we change the game." He opened his eyes. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that for 4 months you've protected me by making me invisible or by hiding me behind your power." Amara's voice was steady. "But maybe it's time I became visible in a different way. Not as your weakness, as your advocate." "Amara, no, what?" "Listen to me." She squeezed his hand. Marco's narrative only works if people believe you're a monster and he's a victim. But what if I go public, tell our story? How his father tried to extort me through my father's medical debt. How the Calabrese family targeted me specifically. How everything that followed was them escalating and you defending. That makes you a target. I'm already a target. $15 million, remember? Amara's smile was bitter. But if I'm public, if I'm visible, if I tell the truth before Marco controls the narrative, then killing me becomes too complicated. I become more valuable alive as a witness. Min-jae stared at her, and she could see his mind working despite the pain. You'd have to testify. Against the Calabrese family. In federal court. Yes. They'd destroy you on the stand, bring up every association with me, paint you as a criminal's accomplice. Let them try. Amar's voice hardened. I'm a waitress who got dragged into a mafia war because I spoke French to the wrong person. I'm someone whose father almost died because criminals bought his medical debt as leverage. I'm a victim who fought back. That's the story that plays on the news. That's the story that makes Marco look like the monster he is. And me. You're the man who protected me, who eliminated the people trying to hurt me. Self-defense, protection of another person, not pretty, but justifiable. She paused. But Min-jae, if I do this, you have to make a choice. What choice? Whether you want to keep being the king of New York's underworld, or whether you want a different life. Amara met his eyes. Because I can't testify for you and stay with you if you're still running a criminal empire. The optics don't work. The strategy falls apart. The words hung between them, heavy and final. Min-jae stared at the ceiling for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. I built this empire from nothing. Spent 15 years creating something powerful enough to protect me from the people who tried to destroy my family and soul. It's all I've ever known. I know, but it's also cost me everything that matters. Trust, peace, the ability to love someone without it becoming a weapon. He turned his head to look at her. I almost died yesterday, and the only thing I could think about while bleeding out was that I'd never see you again, never get to wake up next to you without checking for threats, never have a life that wasn't built on violence. Tears burned Amara's eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying if we survive this, if your plan works, if we somehow make it through, I want out. Not completely. I can't just abandon the people who depend on me, but legitimate businesses, legal operations, a way to transition the empire into something that doesn't require me to be a monster. He reached up with his good hand to cup her face. I'm saying I choose you, whatever that requires. Amara kissed him, careful of his injuries, pouring everything she felt into that kiss. Relief and terror, and love so intense, it hurt. Okay, she whispered against his lips. Then let's burn it all down and build something new. Amara gave her first interview 72 hours later. She sat in a hotel room in Manhattan, facing a journalist from the New York Times who had broken multiple organized crime stories. Sarah had arranged the meeting, had verified the journalist's credibility, had ensured the interview would be recorded and published exactly as given. Min-jae was in a private medical facility in Connecticut, recovering under armed guard while doctors worked to save his life properly. Jin coordinated security, Lee managed his care, Sarah handled the press strategy, and Amara became the face of their survival. Start at the beginning, the journalist said, her recorder running. How did you meet Kang Min-jae? So Amara told the story. Not the sanitized version, not the romantic version, the true version. She talked about serving him at Noir Elise, about learning he was dangerous but being drawn into conversations that made him seem human, about the night men attacked her in an alley and Min-jae's violent response, about discovering her father's debt had been bought by criminals specifically to use against her. She talked about the Calabrese family, about Anthony's attempt to force her into betrayal, about Marco's war that killed innocent people and destroyed lives. She talked about loving someone dangerous and learning to become dangerous herself to survive. Some people will say you're a criminal's accomplice, the journalist said carefully, that you benefited from illegal activity. Some people will say that, Amara agreed. But those people weren't cornered in an alley by men threatening to sell them into trafficking. Those people didn't watch their father dying from medical debt that was weaponized against them. Those people didn't have to choose between letting criminals destroy them or accepting protection from someone powerful enough to fight back. So you don't regret it? I regret that the world is broken enough that I had to make those choices in the first place. Amara's voice was steady. I regret that healthcare debt can be sold to criminals. I regret that protection from violence requires aligning with violence. I regret that women like me are invisible until we become useful to powerful men. She paused. But do I regret surviving? No, never. The interview ran the next day on the front page. Within hours, it exploded across social media. News channels picked it up. Talk shows debated it. The story stopped being about a mob war and became about something bigger, about how vulnerable people were exploited by systems of debt and violence, about how self-defense looked different when you were fighting criminal organizations, about how love and survival got tangled together in ways that defied easy moral categorization. Public opinion shifted, not completely, not universally, but enough. Marco Calabrese's lawyers tried to spin their own narrative, but it fell flat against Amara's testimony. The FBI investigation expanded to include the debt collection operation that had targeted her father, uncovering a network of extortion that implicated multiple crime families. 6 weeks after the warehouse firefight, federal prosecutors offered Min Jae a deal. Full cooperation with the investigation into the Calabrese family and associated criminal enterprises. In exchange, immunity for specific charges related to the shootout, provided he could demonstrate self-defense and protection of others. It wasn't a clean escape. Min Jae would still face scrutiny, still have restrictions, still be watched. But it was survival. He took the deal. Mac. The trial lasted 4 months. Amara testified for 3 days, walking the jury through everything that had happened. The defense tried to destroy her credibility, tried to paint her as a willing participant in criminal enterprise. But her story held. Her evidence held. The truth, messy and complicated as it was, held. Marco Calabrese was convicted on multiple counts of conspiracy, attempted murder, and racketeering. He received 45 years in federal prison. The rest of the Calabrese family fragmented, their empire dismantled piece by federal authorities and rival organizations moving to claim territory. Min Jae cooperated fully with investigators, providing information that took down 3 other major criminal operations in exchange for the immunity that let him walk free. But the cost was everything he'd built. The shipping empire was sold to a legitimate corporation. The underground networks were dissolved or handed over to lieutenants who could operate independently. The safe houses, the cash reserves, the connections that had made him untouchable, all of it liquidated or abandoned. What remained was enough money to live comfortably, and a reputation that would follow him forever. 1 year after the night in the warehouse, Amara and Min Jae stood in an empty penthouse overlooking Manhattan, watching movers carry out the last pieces of furniture. No regrets? Amara asked quietly. Min Jae was quiet for a long moment, his arm wrapped around her waist. I regret the people who died. I regret the pain I caused. I regret that it took almost losing everything to realize what mattered. He turned to look at her. But I don't regret choosing you. I never will. They'd bought a house in Vermont under new names. Nothing fancy, just a farmhouse on 10 acres, far from the city that had nearly destroyed them. Min Jae was consulting for corporate security firms now, using his strategic mind for legal purposes. Amara had enrolled in an online graduate program to finish her linguistics degree. Her father lived nearby in a small cottage. His health finally stabilized, his debt erased, his daughter safe. It was quiet. Sometimes unbearably quiet after the chaos they'd survived. But it was theirs. You think we'll ever stop looking over our shoulders? Amara asked. Probably not. Some habits don't break. Min Jae pulled her closer. But at least we're looking together. They left the penthouse for the last time as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the skyline in shades of gold and crimson. The city that had tried to kill them and failed. The city where they'd found each other in the wreckage of their former lives. As they drove north toward their new life, Amara thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago. Invisible, struggling, trapped by circumstances she couldn't control. That woman was gone forever. In her place was someone harder. Someone who had learned that survival sometimes required becoming the thing you feared. Someone who had loved a monster and found the human beneath the reputation. Someone who had discovered that strength wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and doing it anyway. 3 years later, Amara stood in the kitchen of their Vermont farmhouse, chopping vegetables for dinner while rain drummed against the windows. The house smelled like herbs and bread baking, comfortable and lived in. Through the window, she could see Min Jae in the barn he'd converted into a workshop, building furniture by hand. It was meditative, he'd told her, helped quiet the part of his mind that still planned strategies and calculated threats. Her father was visiting for the weekend, dozing in the living room with a book on his chest. His health had stabilized completely, the trauma of those years fading into something manageable. Amara's phone buzzed, a text from Jin, who visited once a month and called weekly. Lee's getting married next spring. You're both invited. No excuses. She smiled and typed back a confirmation. Jin had taken over what remained of Min Jae's legitimate business interests, transforming them into a successful consulting firm. Sarah worked with him, using her technical skills for corporate security. The men who'd survived the war had scattered, some going legitimate, others disappearing into new lives. The criminal empire that had nearly consumed them all was gone, replaced by something cleaner, if less powerful. The oven timer went off. Amara pulled out the bread, setting it on the counter to cool. Through the window, she saw Min Jae heading back toward the house, his hair longer now, his face relaxed in a way it never had been in New York. He'd gained weight, slept through the night most of the time, laughed more, touched her constantly, as if reassuring himself she was real and staying. They talked about getting married, hadn't decided yet. The piece of paper felt less important than the life they'd built together, quiet and ordinary and impossibly precious after everything they'd survived. Min Jae entered through the back door, stomping mud off his boots. Something smells incredible. Bread and stew. Your father-in-law is asleep again. He's not my father-in-law until you agree to marry me. I haven't heard a proposal. That's because I'm waiting for the right moment. It's been 3 years. How much more right does it need to be? Min Jae crossed the kitchen and pulled her against him, his hands settling on her waist. You want me to propose right now? While you're covered in flour and I smell like sawdust? I want you to propose when it feels true, not when it feels romantic. Amara reached up to brush sawdust from his hair. We've never been romantic. We've been real, messy, complicated. That's what I want. The truth, not the performance. Something shifted in his expression. He took her hand and led her to the back porch, out into the rain that was softer now, more mist than downpour. The truth is I love you more than I've ever loved anything, Min Jae said quietly. The truth is I spent 15 years building an empire to feel powerful, and it made me emptier than I've ever been. The truth is this life, this quiet, boring, ordinary life with you, is the only thing that's ever made me feel human. He squeezed her hands. The truth is, I want to spend whatever time I have left making bread and building furniture and waking up next to you. So yes, Amara Vale, will you marry me? Not because it's romantic, but because it's true. Amara's eyes burned with tears. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. I'll spend my life with you. I'll choose you every day the same way I chose you in that warehouse and in that hospital and in every impossible moment since. He kissed her there on the porch, in the rain, with her father asleep inside and dinner cooking, and the life they'd fought for spread out around them in imperfect, beautiful reality. When they finally pulled apart, Amara rested her forehead against his. Do you miss it? The power? The control? Sometimes, Min Jae admitted. I miss knowing I could fix any problem with money or force. I miss the clarity of that world. Threats were obvious, solutions were brutal but effective. He paused. But I don't miss the person I was. I don't miss looking at you and seeing a liability instead of a partner. I don't miss the violence. Liar. You miss the violence a little. Maybe a little. He smiled slightly. But I like this more. Building things instead of destroying them. Protecting you by being present instead of by eliminating threats. Sleeping without checking for assassins. That's a low bar. It's the life we have. And it's enough. They went back inside together, Min Jae kissing her father's forehead to wake him while Amara set the table. They ate dinner as the rain stopped and stars emerged over Vermont's quiet mountains, talking about ordinary things, the garden they'd plant in spring, whether to adopt a dog, what color to paint the guest room. Conversations that would bore most people. Conversations that felt like miracles after everything they'd survived. Later that night, after her father had gone to bed and Min Jae was reading beside her, Amara thought about the arc of her life. How she'd gone from invisible waitress to crime lord's lover to federal witness to whatever she was now. A woman who had learned to be seen, who had learned that love wasn't about saving or being saved, but about choosing each other through the impossible parts. Who had learned that strength came in forms she'd never expected. "What are you thinking about?" Min Jae asked, setting down his book. "How far we've come. How much we've changed. Do you wish we could go back? Take different paths?" Amar considered the question seriously. "I wish we hadn't had to go through so much pain to get here. I wish people hadn't died. I wish my father hadn't suffered. But go back and never meet you? Never become who I am now?" She shook her head. "No, I wouldn't change that. Even knowing what it cost? Especially knowing what it cost." She turned to face him. "Because the cost taught me that I'm stronger than I ever believed, that I can survive things that should have destroyed me, that love isn't weakness, it's the thing worth surviving for." Min Jae pulled her close, and she settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, strong, alive against all odds. Outside, Vermont's winter silence wrapped around their small farmhouse. Inside, they held each other in the darkness. Two people who had walked through fire and somehow emerged on the other side. Not unscathed, not unchanged, but together. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. 5 years after the war ended, Amara Vale stood in front of a classroom at Burlington Community College, teaching intermediate French to 20 students who had no idea about her past. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, her hair natural and pulled back. She looked exactly like what she was, a graduate student finishing her PhD in linguistics, teaching part-time to pay for her research. Invisible again, but by choice this time. After class, she walked to her car and drove home to the farmhouse where Min Jae was probably cooking dinner because he'd discovered he loved it and was actually good at it. Her phone rang. Jin's number. "Hey," she answered. "What's up?" "Just checking in, making sure you're both still alive and boring." "Very alive, extremely boring." "Good, that's what we fought for." Jin paused. "Lee's baby was born last night, a girl. They named her Amara." Her chest tightened. "They did?" "Yeah, Lee said you saved all our lives by being brave enough to testify. He wanted to honor that." Amara had to pull over because tears were blurring her vision. "Tell him thank you, and tell him I'm honored." "Will do. Take care of yourself. And tell the old man I said hello." She hung up and sat in her car, crying for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, for the life they'd lost, for the life they'd gained, for the people who had died, and the people who had survived, for everything they'd endured to reach this quiet, ordinary moment. When she finally drove home, Min Jae was indeed cooking, some complicated Korean dish he'd been perfecting for months. He looked up when she entered, read her face immediately. "What happened?" "Lee had his baby. They named her after me." Min Jae crossed the kitchen and held her while she cried against his shoulder. He understood without explanation, understood that she was crying for all of it, the violence and the survival, the cost and the redemption, the version of herself she'd lost, and the version she'd become. "We did okay," he said quietly. "Didn't we? In the end?" "Yeah." Amara pulled back to look at him. "We did okay." They ate dinner on the porch as summer fireflies drifted through the darkness. They talked about her research and his latest furniture project and whether they should finally plan that wedding. They lived. Not the life either of them had imagined, not the one they would have chosen if the world had been fair or kind, but theirs. Built on blood and sacrifice and the stubborn refusal to let violence define them completely. Years later, when Amara was asked what she'd learned from it all, she thought carefully before answering. "I learned that strength isn't about being fearless or powerful. It's about choosing to survive even when survival costs everything. I learned that love doesn't save you. You save yourself and each other every single day through small choices that add up to a life. I learned that becoming dangerous to protect yourself isn't the same as becoming a monster. And I learned that the hardest thing in the world is building something gentle after you've learned how to destroy." She paused, then finished with the truth that had taken years to understand. I learned that redemption isn't about erasing who you were. It's about becoming someone new without forgetting what it cost to get there. It's about carrying your scars and choosing every day not to inflict the same wounds on others. It's about surviving and then figuring out what the hell to do with that survival. That was the real ending, not a fairy tale, not a clean resolution where everything was fixed. Just two people who had walked through darkness and chosen, against all odds, to build something light on the other side. Just a woman who had been invisible and learned to be seen, who had been powerless and learned to fight, who had been alone and learned to love someone as broken as she was. Just a man who had been a king and learned to be human, who had commanded through fear and learned to live through grace, who had survived by being dangerous and learned that sometimes the bravest thing was choosing gentleness. Just a quiet life in Vermont, far from the city that had nearly consumed them. Just enough. Just everything. Just real. And in the end, Amara Vale discovered that was the greatest power of all. Not the ability to dominate or destroy, but the ability to survive and then choose what kind of person that survival made you. She chose to be someone who remembered the darkness, but lived in the light. Someone who had conquered the most dangerous man in New York, not through force, but through seeing the human beneath the monster and loving him anyway. Someone who proved that the invisible could become unforgettable not by demanding to be seen, but by becoming too essential to ignore. That was her victory. That was her revolution. That was the story of how a waitress who spoke French became a queen who chose to abdicate her throne and found that ordinary life was the greatest throne of all. And every morning when she woke up beside Minjay in their farmhouse in Vermont, alive and safe and impossibly ordinary, Amara Vale whispered the same thing. We made it. Against all odds, despite everything, together, they made it.